welcome to this special one-off episode, a collaboration with the Beyond the Veil podcast by Brett Rogers and Lee Wise. The guys came over to meet me. We had a great chat in the 166-year-old Marsden Mechanics Institute about all things paranormal and, of course, specifically poltergeists. It's quite a long interview covering my lifelong interest in the paranormal, why I started the podcast, some of the series, and lots of general chat around the subject. We recorded this earlier in the year, so at the time we were able to discuss Keighley, London and Sunderland. I hope you enjoy it. Huge thanks to Brett and Lee. Make sure you check out their content. It's a paranormal podcast done really well without all the nonsense. Enjoy.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us once again Beyond the Veil. I'm Brett Rogers, and as always I'm joined by Lee Wise.
Good day.
You're saying good day this time, because it's usually on a night when we record.
It's not an evening,
yeah. Well done. Very perceptive of you.
Thank you.
And tonight we're joined for a very special episode as we sit down with historian and paranormal researcher Stephen Miller, the man behind the podcast The Poltergeist Project. Welcome.
Hello.
So, for those unfamiliar, the Poltergeist Project has built a reputation for its historical focus and approach to paranormal storytelling, specifically delving into poltergeist cases. It's a channel and podcast that approaches the paranormal with the same fascination that drives us and so many towards these stories in the first place. Not simply to shock or sensationalise, but to explore the mystery that exists within the unknown. Over the course of tonight's episode, we'll be discussing Stephen's interest in the paranormal, the inspiration behind the Poltergeist Project, some of the stories and cases that he's covered and have stayed with him the most, perhaps. So, also, despite all of our advances in science and understanding, why we continue and remain endlessly captivated by the unexplained. We'll also be diving into the theory of poltergeist activity itself and discussing paranormal encounters, strange experiences, and questioning whether some stories may contain truths that are stranger than fiction. So, shall we just crack straight on with it?
Yeah, dive in. Yeah, I'm happy one.
Excellent. So, dim the lights, settle in, and join us as we step once again into the world of the paranormal, the supernatural, and the unexplained, and take a look beyond the veil. So, I'm just going to quickly start just by sort of categorising what a poltergeist is. So, a poltergeist is a type of alleged paranormal phenomenon traditionally associated with unexplained physical disturbances within a home or location. The word itself originates from the German language combining poltern, meaning to make noise or to rumble, and Geist, meaning ghost or spirit. Unlike traditional hauntings, which are often described as involving apparitions or lingering presences tied to a location, poltergeist activity is typically characterised by movement and disruption. Reports commonly include unexplained knocking sounds, footsteps, objects moving or being thrown, doors opening and closing on their own, electrical disturbances, and in some cases, physical contact with witnesses. Throughout history, poltergeist cases have been reported across many cultures and countries, with some of the most famous investigations becoming widely documented within both paranormal research and popular culture. Interesting, many researchers have noted that reported activity often appears to centre around a particular individual rather than a specific place, leading to theories ranging from spirit activity to psychological and environmental explanations. Skeptics and scientists have proposed a variety of possible causes for alleged poltergeist phenomena, including misinterpretation, environmental factors, fraud, stress-related behaviours, and subconscious psychological effects. Meanwhile, paranormal investigators continue to debate whether some cases may represent genuinely unexplained activity. Regardless of the explanation, poltergeists remain one of the most enduring and controversial subjects within the study of the paranormal. So, you run a podcast called The Poltergeist Project.
Yes.
And before we jump into your podcast, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I live in West Yorkshire now, although I'm originally from Lancashire, and I work for libraries at the moment, but my career has always been museums and archives. I did my degree in history, I did my master's in history, so I've always had that historical interest and, applied it in a professional way, and that's usually, I tended to curate exhibitions and write books, do lots of talks, all that kind of thing has been my bread and butter, I suppose. And with a kind of always an interest on telling stories of everyday people. I've always been, I worked in Barnsley for a good time, and it's all coal mining. I'm obviously live in West Yorkshire, it's all mills. I'm very interested in northern working class experiences and those people that don't have big history books written about them. So there's that kind of side to it. But aside from my professional interests and how I've ended up where I am in my career, I've always had, from being very little, long before I was interested in history, this kind of interest, obsession in anything weird and wonderful and paranormal. From being, as old as I remember, we didn't have a library near me when I was a kid. So it was one of those mobile ones used to pull up on the community centre car park.
Yeah.
Tiny little book collection, hardly anything. But at the start of the kids section and the adult section, there's this really short bit of the Dewey Decimal, which is how they number non-fiction books. It's 000 whatever.
Yeah.
And that was all. They just had this little section of weird things. It was UFOs and poltergeists and things like that. So I was always drawn to those. Actually, when I left in year 6, we could choose a book. So everyone was choosing, novels and things like that. Mine was this weird, non-fiction book on UFOs with all these, dubious photographs. But I think it was, the time I was born in, 84. So growing up in the 90s, it was X-Files and Independence Day. And,
absolutely.
Yeah, Strange But True. Do you remember the Michael Aspel series?
Yeah.
I've watched a few of them on YouTube recently. It's amazing.
Memory unlocked. I forgot about that. Good Lord.
And it was a bit like that with X-Files. I was terrified of it because I was probably a bit young, really.
Yeah.
When it first came out, but I was obsessed with it. I loved
Lee
it.
was born 83, I was 85, so
Yeah,
we're in the
so
same
similar.
age pool. So, I mean, I remember the same feeling of watching X-Files, being fascinated by it, but then at the same time, I was a little scared by some of those episodes, 100%. And
I think particularly, actually, the ghost poltergeist side of it seemed the most scary to me. So something about aliens, it's they're real. They're not, well, they probably are real somewhere, but whether they've been here, I don't know. But.
You don't tend to think, apart from alien abduction, I think when you're looking at UFOs and things, you don't tend to think they're for nefarious reasons.
Yeah.
Whereas ghosts always seem to be sinister.
Yeah.
Certainly when you're younger. It's a scary thing. And it unlocked a memory when you were talking. My fascination, as did Brett's, started really early as well, didn't it? But I remember one of the first things I learned about the paranormal was what poltergeist meant, noisy ghost.
Yes.
And that just unlocks a memory in a sense, in that it was the first thing I learned and just takes me back to that fascination that you had and all of those obscure books that you used to come across.
Yeah. I've got Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World with me that predates me by a little bit, but it's an amazing book. The Crystal Skull on the front cover. It's a great book. It's really interesting, full of some loads of really good stories. There's things like that got me into it. And then I've probably ummed and ahed. Well, no, I didn't really think. Maybe I thought at some point I could do something combining these two things, but I think it was it wasn't an obvious kind of thing for me to do, but end of last year, start of this year, I kind of thought, I'll just do it. Let's see what happens.
With us,
It seemed like a really obvious thing, when we look back at it, that we should have done it sooner. But then it was, you came up with the idea, Lee. You was just we told the story.
The dog and thought, we should start a podcast.
We told the story in our podcast that we were away, just telling stories to each other while we were away from our 40th, and just telling stupid, scary stories, and we really freaked ourselves out, didn't we? And then it just became this thing of we should. Well, you said you was like, I really enjoyed that. We should do a podcast and do that all the time. And I was just that is so obvious, and that's a really good point, because it leads me into my next question, which was, so I mean, for a lot of listeners who may not have discovered the Poltergeist Project yet, but How would you describe the podcast, and what really first inspired you to create it?
Yeah, so it started, actually, I've got a mate who has a YouTube channel called Rob. He does Trails of the Unexpected. She's out in East Yorkshire as well, a lot of Flamborough around that area, so it's worth checking out. So he'd started this YouTube channel, and I thought, oh, right, yeah, like, you know, and we were chatting about it. I saw that he was, I suppose, the inspiration for me having to go and doing the podcast. But he's a great photographer, editor, he's brilliant at all that side. And I was like, well, I can't do any of that. Like, I can work a laptop and get a mic. But so I thought, audio only, I could probably handle that, and I'll kind of do it as basic as I can, and kind of, because what I can do is the history, the research. So I thought, well, that's where my skill set lies. But at the start of it, it was only really meant to be one story. So it started with the Keithley story. And actually, the podcast was just called The Keithley Poltergeist.
It was originally, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I got into that, but I've known about that story for over a decade. You know, it's been in the back of my mind because I'd just randomly come across it researching for something else. So I did that, and I was getting to the end of it and thought, oh, well, this has been quite good fun, this. Maybe there's like more. Maybe I could like this could be a format. So that's the point where I kind of switched it to the Poltergeist Project with a view that, yeah, I could jump on, do any story then, you know, with a few kind of fixed parameters. UK only, has to be at least 100 years old. They're my only rules.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which is an old archivist rule. It's a thing, like, you know, you can't view records that are more recent than 100 years. So I have to wait for the census to come out. Sometimes they sneak it out a bit before. The 100-year rule is a
naughty.
Is a rule. So I thought, well, and also I didn't want to like be getting into people that might still be alive and telling, because these stories are often like deeply personal, or a lot of my cases deal with people who were anonymized, and I'm kind of outing them for the first time. So I'm happier if they're already passed away than when they're still alive. So I'm dealing with like grandchildren, even not children from the people involved. So it just gives that bit of protection for the people I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's just a bit of respect as well. I mean, no, I'm sort of someone somewhere will go, oh yeah, but you don't mind disrespecting them now they're dead. But it's just like, I think it's just really a case of like, well, you're not looking to draw any negative attention to anyone who would, well, potential negative attention to anybody that could still be around now.
Exactly, yeah. You know? And you know, there is very much, I'm telling their stories from the records, you know, it's very rare that I get the direct kind of voices involved, even just because of the nature of the cases and the length of time I'm talking about sometimes. So yeah, I definitely try, and I am very protective actually the people I'm researching in a general sense, because I have been in touch with descendants and things of people who I've talked about series. So you know, I'm very aware that can happen.
We were discussing on the way here actually that, you know, sometimes when you speak to people about anything paranormal, a vast majority of people are fascinated by it, even if they're complete skeptics. They still like talking about it. But then there's a subset of people who just think you're crazy, and you see it in their eyes. Sometimes you'll say, you know, I had a thing recently where I told somebody I was a co-host of a paranormal project, and I saw the person's face drop just for a second, but I knew they thought I was nuts.
Because unfortunately, that is what it is with the paranormal, isn't it? You know, it's people either are fascinated by it, or they're just completely switched off by it, and they're just, you know, sometimes they'll make judgments on you based on your interest for it, and which is very unfortunate. But it also can mean that for some people they don't want to talk about. I mean, especially if you had quite a sensationalized story, or a story that was focused heavily in the media, I just want to put this behind me. I don't want to talk about it anymore. You know, it draws too much attention to me, and especially if you wasn't a believer in yourself, and you had this in your past, you'd just be like, I don't want to talk about it because I don't believe any of this nonsense. You know,
and I think there is a thing, isn't there, about sensationalizing these stories. As soon as like the press get hold of it, it gets all silly, and I think the same actually modern, you know, whether it's AI generated YouTube videos about a case or whatever. I think there's a tendency they look for the spectacular. It's all very surface level. They don't put any work into researching it really, because they just want clicks and hits, and that's all they're bothered about. So I was much more just wanting to tell the story as well as I could from a historical perspective, and that was really all I was bothered about. So that's again giving me a freedom to kind of do what I want, which is what's great about the kind of medium, isn't it? You can do what you want.
Yeah. Well, I think it's safe to say that, you know, I mean, your podcast does feel different from many other paranormal podcasts because it approaches cases almost like historical investigations rather than just simply retelling ghost stories, which was what we were just basically saying there. And I guess that from your personal interests anyway, that probably that was always your vision for the podcast, wasn't it, really?
Yeah, it's a history podcast that happens to be about poltergeists. At its heart, it's a history podcast. And what I'm doing is, in some cases, fairly basic, local family history research that lots of people could do. But I'm, obviously specifically picking out stories that have got this thing that's not normal or not usual or something weird's happening and seeing whether through, really getting into it and looking at the facts that exist, what I can surmise from the case or, just telling the story more fully than it has been before. There's a couple of the cases have been picked up by the odd person here and there, but it's nice to be able to do it and give it justice, because I think that was another actually bugbear, a slight bugbear, about how badly history tends to be done on, particularly in this field, but in many fields, the history is kind of used and abused to justify all sorts without much rigour to it, so it's nice to be able to, again.
And we are aware of that because of our, we're close with Mike, aren't we? Yeah. Mike Covell, the historian in Hull, and the amount of histories that he's realised people have concocted for the sake of either just wanting to have a really good historical hook for people or a historical hook for the paranormal, and it's like, God,
it's been a couple of times, hasn't it, where he sort of said to us quietly, "That's bollocks."
That's it. Yeah, I mean, we won't name them specifically, but there's been a couple of times where he's heard stuff and he's just been like, "Oh yeah," and then afterwards he's just been like, "Lot of shit."
Yeah, and it works the other way as well. I think like people, they make up stuff and try and justify a story, but then they miss out on stuff that might be a factor in the story because they don't do their homework, so they're missing out on things as well that could be an interesting aspect of a story. So it's not just from a kind of negative as well. They're missing out on the positives of doing like proper history.
No, that's a really good point, because I mean there could be something that's genuinely fascinating based in truth, but because the lie or the fictitious one sounds a little bit more dramatic, they go with that one instead. It's like, but you actually do have something really good there that you could use, and maybe just because it doesn't tell the story of a lady in white jumping out and slapping someone in the face, it's not. That sounds more exciting, so you're going to go with the lie instead. What a terrible shame, And you
can see it a mile off. Whenever anyone says something like, "It has been reported that," or some people say, it's like, who, when, who reported what? Anyone who starts a story like that, I'm like, alarm bells are ringing in.
Exactly.
Who said that?
So they say. Exactly. But what was it then specifically about poltergeist cases that you wanted to cover for your podcast? I mean, again, you said it was originally going to be like this mini series about the Keighley poltergeist, but what specifically was it that you was, okay, I'm going to do a podcast into the paranormal, but I'm going to mainly focus on the Keighley poltergeist?
I think my background, although I'm obviously very interested in it, is as a skeptic at heart, really. If I had to kind of put my mortgage on one way or the other, I'd probably go on a skeptical answer. And poltergeists, what I particularly like about them is the kind of physicality of them, and they often happen in front of multiple witnesses. And all the stories that I've researched, something was thrown across the room. It physically happened, Whereas if I was doing ghosts, it's that, a tingle on your spine or a sense of unease or a feeling that something wasn't right. All these things that they're like too subjective for me to do historical research on. Like I'm not like saying against them or anything as genuine experiences, but there's a lot going on there that can be misinterpreted or could be so many millions of things. But if a kettle is thrown across the room, who threw it is the story or how it got there. So I like that element.
I think you're right. The sort of things like the feeling of unease or whatever. It's quite a strong personal experience in some cases, but it doesn't mean an awful lot to everybody else just hearing it.
Well, where's the evidence for it?
Yeah. And that's not, like I said, not to dismiss it, but also the thing about things moving is, like we're sat here in this room now, if this table started lifting, we're all seeing this table lifting. So there's that as well.
And I'll be out there, just so you know.
Whereas me seeing a shadow go past the doorway could be so many things, couldn't it? And you might not have witnessed it, but so I think that's why I kind of leaned on poltergeist rather than more general ghost stories, or, I really like UFOs and alien stories and things. I love cryptid stories, all those things. But yeah, Poltergeist really kind of fit. And like I say, initially I was just going to tell the Keithley story, but it kind of developed obviously after that. What it has become.
As you've gone along with your research and all of these projects and all of these poltergeist cases you've been looking into, has it made you more of a believer, or has it increased your skepticism?
I think I'm aware that because I've looked at hundreds and hundreds of historical poltergeist cases now, and 95% of them are explainable by fairly, to me, apparent things. So the ones I tend to research for the series are ones that there's something I can't explain, at least, on the surface of them. But then there are a couple of the series or incidents within the series where things have happened that I don't have an explanation for. Right. So yeah, I suppose it pushes me more down whether there is something going on that is unexplainable. Whether that has made me more of a team believer or team skeptic, I'm not sure really at the end. But yeah, it's kind of certainly making me question it. I probably thought I'd be able to not debunk them, but be able to explain them away. Yeah. And there's a few incidents within the series that I've not been able to. So I suppose that kind of speaks for itself in terms of
definitely
what was happening.
Because I think it made me think of the question when you said about if this table was to start moving, because before we did the podcast, we'd been on quite a few sort of ghost hunt evenings, been to really quite atmospheric places full of history. But I was starting to really move much more towards the sceptical side. I've always been somewhere in the middle. I very much want to believe these things are true, but whether I do or not is more debatable. And I was somewhere in the middle. But I really started thinking, we're going to these places, we're doing Ouija boards, we're calling out, we're doing this and that, and nothing much is happening to me personally. And it was not to disparage anybody's experience who was there and experiencing whatever they were experiencing, but it just didn't happen to me. Yeah. So I started to really move over to the skeptic side of things. And then we were at Ripon Warehouse, and a huge table ended up lifted up off the floor and crashing back down. And that really pushed my needle back over to the believer side of things. So it's interesting.
That's it. I've never had a personal experience, I suppose. It's a big thing for me. I have had weird things happen and things that, I can imagine being interpreted as, something paranormal, but I've never had anything that's happened to me that I've been like, that's it, I'm in. Which I get would be like an incredibly powerful thing to happen to you personally, and but it's just never happened to me, and I'd love it to, but it hasn't ever, and whether that's.
I mean, you covered a question early that I was actually.
Sorry, Brett.
No, because it's a good question, because I was also going to ask, like, which you also covered there, that you've never experienced anything, but what do you think then was the first sort of paranormal story or case that you heard where you thought, okay, that scares me, that actually frightens me? Do you remember anything?
I think it would have been like something on telly, or, because I wasn't a big reader as a kid, so it would have been something on telly. And I even remember just the opening credits of the X-Files, and that shadowy thing walking down the stairs was the worst bit of it. Like, I hated that bit. And there were a couple of X-Files episodes, I've rewatched it as a grown-up since, that are very kind of around hauntings and poltergeists. Yeah. There were a few things, I remember as a kid, like, because we were into it, and there's a few of us, we'd go wandering through like the woods late at night, and we'd try, but we'd be winding each other up, and it was really hard to know what was going on. I remember going, like, hanging around a graveyard thinking, oh well, we've got to see a ghost, we'll see one here. My mate had a dog, and his dog started really going at this old guy that was there, and we're like, oh god, what's wrong with it? And then I swear we turned around, looked back, and the old man was gone, but again, I was probably like 10 or something, it's hard to I've had a few weird things happen. Like, I remember after my daughter was born, we'd been in hospital a long time, and I probably hadn't slept for quite a while. And my wife was staying in, and we pulled up at our house, which is just up the hill from where we are now. And I got out of the car, and I heard this absolutely blazing row. Literally, like, sounded like an outsider pub Saturday night. Full on, there was a brawl going on. And it was a really old house that we used to live in, like late 17th century. And you parked above it and then walked round and down, because it obviously didn't have kind of road access. I thought, oh God, the like neighbours are absolutely kicking off here or something. So I went running down from the car around the corner, got to the bottom. There's nobody there, nothing. But also, I hadn't slept for 36 hours, so who knows, like, what's going on. We've had a few things. I remember, like, before we were married, living in a house, and just didn't feel right. Exactly that feeling of it didn't feel right, and to the point where, like, we'd often sleep downstairs and things. We'd be like, but again, at the time, it felt scary. But now I think, well, we hadn't lived away from home before. You've got all those other things going on psychologically. I'm like, well, we were living in this terrace house. Obviously, there were neighbours and floorboards moving and things that were doing that there. Yeah. So now I can rationalise it. But I remember being scared at the time. I remember my wife waking me in the night saying there's someone on the corridor and going out there, like expecting to be a burglar there or something, and there's not. So I definitely had those kind of weird experiences. But I do, it's probably because of that kind of core skeptic kind of lean on. I'll find an explanation for it.
Well, I think
as much as I can. Yeah,
I think it's healthy too, though.
Yeah.
We've talked about this all the time, haven't we? Where people just instantly want to rationalise it that because something's just a little strange or whatever, that it's immediately paranormal. I mean, I remember the first house we moved into when we were kids. So, like when my dad left, when I was only about 8 or 9, the first house we moved into. That wasn't my childhood home. And we moved into this new house, and it was sort of like that new start type thing. There was a really, really strange feeling in that house. And I've talked about it with my mum a few times since then, and she was like, there was a weird feeling in that house. But then the skeptical part of my brain that tries to rationalise it was like, but did I just feel that way because it felt so alien, like that I'd been moved out of my childhood home during quite a traumatic time.
Yeah.
And we've been moved into this new house where I wasn't even in the same area as what I'd grown up in.
Yeah.
Is it just the fact that it felt strange because of that? And then, but there was a weird feeling.
Yeah.
I can't say that it was or it wasn't.
Yeah.
I'm only trying to say that there's potentially factors there that made it feel more strange than what it actually was. And I'm trying to pin it on something paranormal. But my mum did feel the same way as well.
Did your brother feel the same?
Well,
being one of the biggest skeptics I've probably ever come across.
To the point where it's annoying.
I think he could be slapped in the face by a ghost and he still
won't believe it. Yeah, exactly. Well, you see, Cake's he is that type of skeptic where when you've got something you genuinely can't explain, he still won't say, it was a bit weird though. He still won't say. Yeah. So when I've mentioned it before, he'll either make out that he doesn't really remember. Classic. Or he'll just be like, yeah, maybe. It's just very sort of like nonchalant. We're not really sure kind of answer. Not really addressing the fact. But I mean, I remember we spent some nights sleeping in my mum's bed, because I don't really have any memories of our bedroom because we didn't like it in there. There was a weird vibe in there. Well, I don't remember ever playing video games in there, which we always did, didn't we? But there was a weird feeling in the house. But again, I'm not sure if now when I look back, I'm like, okay, well, I can potentially rationalise that now that it was because of the time that it was, which, you see that a lot in poltergeist cases as well, don't you? Childhood traumas, turbulent households and things like that. So was it just that I was experiencing? I don't know. But talking about like things that affect you like psychologically, I mean, have you ever felt like researching hauntings has ever affected you psychologically? Like, have you ever sort of felt like, I'm sort of being quote unquote exposed too much to this stuff? It's making me sort of weird things.
I have had a few comments though. It's interesting actually when you start doing it. A few comments like, you don't want to mess with this stuff. Like, you shouldn't be talking about it. Don't get involved. I think leave it where it is.
Yeah.
But no, not in terms of. I do get quite emotionally involved in the stories, but in the people, not in the kind of paranormal aspect, And especially like when I start researching a case, I have no idea how it's going to end. So, I'm always worried that it's going to end tragically, or like I don't know that, and I put the first episode not knowing that, So I'm in. I'm going to tell this story, whatever.
I think that's quite a cool format for your podcast. Is that they are like live investigations, essentially. You never start a series, quote unquote series, knowing the full ins and outs of it. And it could literally be a single episode or 2 episodes 6, 7. You never know how long this is going to take until it's done. And I think that's quite a unique format for a podcast, that it is kind of live, done along the way type thing.
Yeah, I think when I got into podcasts, when did everyone get into podcasts? I can't remember. Whenever it happened, I remember like
it's really blown up over the last few years.
I remember like Serial and those kind of ones. Do you remember that? It was.
I think I've heard
about Adnan Syed. It was like a true crime kind of thing, and I quite liked that format of they start their series investigating, and it just rolls on. So you get the ups and the downs and the lows and I quite enjoyed that side of it. And I thought, well, that would work. Also, there's a very kind of boring practical reason as to why I do it like that, in that it's just a time thing. It just makes more sense. I can, I also just record the episodes in one go and put them out. I don't do any editing. So if an episode is 20 minutes long, it's taking me 20 minutes to do. Yeah. So there's some practicality behind it as well, why I do it like that. But also, and I've got things wrong, and I say it like I put episode 1 out and I say, oh, it's happened in this place. I'm doing it on the current series. By episode 2, oh no, actually I got the wrong location. But also part of it is about, like I say, it's a history podcast in many ways. So it's about explaining how I got it wrong and why, and, not kind of shying away from that, but then showing how I put it right to kind of help people who might be interested in, doing their own research into the paranormal or anything really. It's all kind of relevant. Yeah.
I mean, we're going to cover some of the cases you have covered on your podcast shortly, but during your investigations, have you ever sort of genuinely stopped at a point and gone, okay, I can't explain that?
Yeah. There's several in all of the cases. I think there are incidents that I can't explain.
Wow.
Because I wasn't stood in the room, so I can't, not to say they're not explainable. Like, they might be explainable, but I've not been able to find an obvious explanation for them. There's a few things I have been able to kind of either say it was a trick or someone was messing around, or provide some strong kind of basis for, I can see what's happened here. But there's definitely several incidents where I'm like, I have literally no idea how that's happened. So
I mean, so when we come back to like sort of talking about poltergeist specifically, it could be argued historically that poltergeist cases seem less like ghosts, quote unquote ghosts, and more like chaotic bursts of energy, if we're going to look at it from a supernatural / paranormal perspective. But do you think there's a distinction? Do you think there's a difference between a ghost that is lobbing stuff around versus bursts of energy that seems to react to whatever's in the room or whatever? Yeah,
in the ones that I've studied, which, like I say, will be in the hundreds now, the vast majority don't have any kind of visible visions of a ghost. The vast majority of them are just things happening physically in a space. There are a few where you do get a vision of a person, and of a ghost. But the vast majority aren't that. They are things moving and stuff happening and things fall, knocks, and sometimes, although quite rarely, vocalizations and communication.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there is a bit of a difference. But like I say, you do get that kind of crossover between the two, where you do get. I know that we talked about what defines a kind of poltergeist, that it is around that, and there is that scale that Evelyn Hollow from Uncanny, the parapsychologist, she has a kind of poltergeist scale. It's almost and it follows step by step from various. And a few of the cases have followed that very closely in terms of it ramping up to the point of something.
What was that?
I mentioned Evelyn Hollow when a crow appeared at the window. What's going on there?
That was extraordinary.
I didn't know she had familiars.
Oh, good lord! But yeah, you're right, and I agree. You don't necessarily always see cases of poltergeists linked with images or visions or sights of a spectre.
No.
You don't often see that. It tends to be one or the other, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is rare. And actually, my series don't probably do it justice, because in the first 3 series, 2 of them had visions of people.
Yeah.
Which would suggest it's more common than it is. But behind each series are tens and tens of episodes tens and tens of cases that I've researched that don't have visions. The reason those two are probably in is because the vision adds another element to the story, so it's probably why. So it slightly skews it. It's not quite inaccurate.
Exactly. These bloody crows are
special guests.
I was going to say we've got a live audience for this one. So, we mentioned just moments ago, to be fair, that you often see children or trauma at the centre of poltergeist activity. Why do you think poltergeist activity and phenomena is often so associated with adolescents or emotionally turbulent households?
Yeah, I think the adolescence thing, has become a trope. I think that's Hollywood. And I think because we're all so influenced by all of our first, ideas of poltergeist probably come from the film Poltergeist.
Yeah.
And all those Stephen King, Carrie, and all those kind of things around telekinesis. I think we're also loaded with that imagery, which obviously the cases I'm doing are pre-cinema, so that you don't have any of that. But there is a kind of definite connection between people of that kind of age and poltergeist stories, but I think that's probably very mundane and not paranormal. And in a few of my cases, I've kind of found that where I think it's girls getting to a certain age, of often intelligent, bright girls who get to 12, 13, 14 and realise actually, like, what are their life options? Especially when I'm doing, kind of working class stories. So I think there's a sense of genuine powerlessness within their lives, and so I wonder whether there's some connection there between that sense of not being heard, not being visible, not being kind of gonna have much like sense of ownership of their lives, So I wonder if there is something there that, like I say, is very unparanormal explanation. There's maybe a link.
Yeah, I agree. Because you said as such in one of your Sunderland poltergeist episodes. I think it was maybe the final one, and you said as such. And when you said, pretty much what you just said there, I'm inclined to agree a lot of the time. When you look at cases, which obviously has been debated extensively over the years, which is the Enfield haunting, when you sort of see a household which an absent father, a family struggling at a time when there was a lot of sort of economic struggles at that time in the UK, and you kind of think to yourself, well, yeah, we've got a girl, at the centre of it all. She does have siblings and everything, but there seems to be one that is specifically targeted by this haunting or whatever it was, and you can't help but feel like, well, we all know, we've all seen the pictures that looks like she's basically leaping off a bed, and we're made to believe that she's levitating or she's being lifted up in the air. And it's like, well, that's why it's so heavily debated that it's fraudulent, and it's fake. And I think probably for the reasons like you've just said there, is that when you take situations like that with the living conditions and then the turbulent household, is it just a case of it's a cry for help or a cry for attention or something like that?
I think the difficulty is maybe it's sometimes a bit of both. The movie about East Drive, when the lights went out. So you saw in that, I presume it roughly follows the truth, that these things started happening to this family, but then the girl, I think, did make some stuff up, but then that immediately sort of, for skeptical-minded people, that immediately appears like everything's just been a hoax from the beginning. And the reason she made it up, presuming that these things did genuinely happen to her, but then she felt the need to make something up, probably comes from that feeling of not being heard or, wanting some attention. And
there becomes pressure, doesn't there, as well? Like, there's this genuinely odd stuff has happened around, and then someone comes to look at it and it's not happening. Yeah, it's an understandable pressure to all of a sudden, like, throw some Lego at his head. Infamously. It's like, you can see why there'd be a lot of pressure, especially as a kid. Like, they were kids, weren't they? And I think there's that worry that all of a sudden the interest in the story is going to sort of just dissipate and disappear, and you don't want that sort of, you don't want that to happen again. Yeah, exactly like what you've just said there. Like, if it doesn't happen, you just like,
oh great, now they're going to turn around and they're not going to pay attention anymore. I need to sort of manifest something myself and just make it happen, and hopefully that'll keep people's interest. So yeah, there probably is an element of that as well. I mean, do you think of the locations you knew about outside of your podcast, and then the ones you've researched, from both perspectives of believer and skeptic, do you think certain locations somehow retain emotional energy or trauma, and then that ultimately attributes to paranormal or poltergeist activity? Or do you think it's a ghost or whatever?
I suppose, honestly, I don't believe in, that kind of stone tape theory and all those like ideas about a place being haunted. So no, I don't believe that.
No.
And like I say, from the cases I've investigated, especially the first one, it definitely wasn't tied to a location. It was tied to a person, and it was happening around her wherever she was, whether she was at home, at work, someone else's house, wherever she was, it was happening.
Yeah.
But then whether that's, an entity, something with her that's making it happen around her, whether it's some kind of energy she has within her and is making it happen, that is obviously the big question. But I don't, the cases I've investigated have tended to be just normal places. And I've always looked into when it's been a house, or have there been other stories from that house pre the story, and there hasn't been so far. There's not been or after, it's not like I found one, it's like, oh, this happened to the family before and it's still happening now. I've not had any of that, so...
I think that's a good point, because I think when you said that there about nothing happening before or since, I always find that's quite fascinating. It's like, okay, well, if something can suddenly start, then the reason for that could be, I don't know, a death that happened and it started since then or whatever. But when it stops after those people move out of that property or have taken ownership of that property and nothing happens ever again, like the people who live in the Enfield house, but the house is still there. It's still occupied. And these people who have lived in there afterwards have never reported paranormal activity.
Yeah, it's probably 3 or 4 years within 100 year of a building.
Yeah,
you've got something going on. Maybe not even that long. I don't know how Enfield went on for, actually. Maybe not even that long.
Yeah.
But it's a short period of time. That said, one of the cases I'm researching at the moment for a series is more haunted housey than the ones I've done so far. So maybe in a couple of months I'll be saying the opposite, but because I'm always open, like I say, to research steering me in another direction. But so far the research is looking more like a haunted house than a particular personality, and actually spreading from the house. It's kind of going into like a haunted village.
Wow.
Maybe, but that series is under.
This is where I think the approach of sort of backing these things, if you look at it from a paranormal side of things, and you back it with history, that becomes convincing. Then, I like it when we'll discuss things with Mike, and the history adds up.
Yeah,
and he just makes it all the more convincing, and it almost instantly, for me anyway, instantly debunks it when it's like, it's a haunted house, and then, well, actually nothing's ever happened in the past, or it wasn't like the one near us, it wasn't some orphanage where children were murdered or anything like that. And then it does do the job of sort of debunking it then. But I think it makes it really fascinating when the history adds up as well.
I think it's really it's nice when it does kind of link in and you can find a historical connection to what's happening. I think is really useful, for whichever way you believe.
Well, I mean, anyone could make up a story about a place being haunted. I mean, the building we're sat in now, is undoubtedly probably very old. We could just all probably
1865.
There we go.
Very old.
It'd be very easy to turn around and say something happened here, and you could make it up.
Hundreds of people will have died in this building.
Oh, great!
From sat watching a show, having a heart attack, or it will have happened in every house. It just happens, doesn't it? It's actually quite hard to prove. I'm always thinking that people talk about, died in this house. I'm like, how do you know someone died in your house? It's quite hard to, unless you're ordering the death certificate. That's quite a thing. Yeah. Because a lot of people, especially in, talking kind of post-50s, 60s, a lot of people died in hospital or in home, not at home. So it's quite unusual, actually. So
Yeah, maybe it became
all these people
unwell
that
at
go
home,
on
but
about
ended up
people
in
who,
hospital.
people who died in their homes. Like, how do you know that? Show me. It's quite hard to find.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very true. It's very true. I mean, as part of your research, then I don't know if this is something you've ever done, but there's obviously been scientific attempts, however controversial, to try and explain poltergeist activity through environmental or neurological phenomena. Has that ever been something you've researched? Like, have you ever researched those theories as part of like trying to quote unquote debunk some of the cases you've investigated?
Yeah, I have, because just out of curiosity. But I obviously do it from a background of I've got like a CGCSE in science or something. I don't have the kind of rigour to do that research justice, probably. So it's a fairly basic level. But I remember looking specifically into RSPK, that idea of psychokinesis around a person, for the first series, because I thought, well, yeah, if that's right, then that would explain a lot of what was going on. But actually reading about RSPK, the more you read, the more it just sounds it's just not true. Like, it doesn't make sense.
It sounds very science fiction, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think, again, watching those kind of films, those 70s horror films where it's like such a thing, isn't it? Someone's moving something across the table, they're doing it with their mind. Oh yeah, that must be it. But from what I've read, it just doesn't add up, in terms of an explanation.
That's it, so much is built into popular culture, isn't it, from those classic movies and tropes. I think you're probably right. Most people's experiences of poltergeists began with the film.
And as you say, even going as far as saying about like the film Carrie, I mean, who doesn't know about Carrie with the ability to move things with the mind and things like that? And it's all connected. It's all connected, and I dare say it all helps to paint this tapestry of the supernatural and the paranormal. So coming to the Keithley case, I mean, that appears to be, as we've said, that's the foundation of the podcast, and it's, all of your historical research, witness accounts and reports. Could you just summarise slightly the case of the Keithley poltergeist and why you chose that case to be the foundation of your podcast?
Yeah, I think I chose it. I mentioned earlier, I was researching for something else, and it was a headline in the Yorkshire Post, this like electrical mill girl or something, whatever the headline was. And that was the thing. And I remember reading about it, and it's always intriguing when the person's anonymised, because, there's a tendency to think, if someone's like shouting about it, maybe they're looking for publicity or whatever. And obviously this person wasn't. And reading about it in that press article, it was all about, experts from Leeds University come in and it being like a really scientific problem and being interested in it. Poltergeist wasn't mentioned. It was all about this kind of weird scientific phenomenon going on, that when she walked in certain areas of the mill that she worked in, the machinery would just break down around her. And it happened like so regularly. I was like, well, it's hard for that to be a coincidence, isn't it? Especially when you've got doctors from the uni coming to test her and to see what was going on. So that was the one that's what piqued my interest, I suppose, because it was perfect for me in that it was something weird going on. No one knew who she was. And I was like, well, I bet I can find out who she was. I've done enough family history to know how to find people from the past. I thought, well, that's story enough. I thought the story's interesting. It's weird. I can't explain it. There's some stuff I know I can do historically, because I will be able to find out who she was, where she lived. They didn't even name the mill or anything. So I thought, well, I can find all that out. So that'll be, interesting to do for me and to kind of reveal that story. And then maybe once I found out who she was, well, then I can tell her life story, and if there was anything going on with her personally that would factor into this weirdness. Because, she was doing this within the mill. All the spinning frames, all the woolen spinning frames would break around her. So they sent her to the kitchen. And then in the kitchen, the pots and pans were flying round, tables were shifted, it was wild. Like, there was so much stuff going on around her. And, the mill management were amazing, really. She had been sacked from a job before. But her manager at the mill she was at, when this was all reported, was incredibly supportive. At a time when he didn't need to be. It'd been very easy just to let her go and get someone else.
You goddamn freak, get out of here!
Yeah. But it's impressive, really. But he kind of stuck by her. I think he must have had, I don't know, I've not been able to find too much about him, but an interest in spiritualism or something was going on personally for him. I think that he took this on as like, oh wow, here we go, because he's the guy. He wrote to Arthur Conan Doyle about it.
Wow.
So he got Arthur Conan Doyle involved, which again makes me think he must have been into this. Like, you wouldn't do it, like, it's not a normal thing for a Yorkshire Mill manager to do, is it?
Yeah, just going to reach out to Arthur Conan Doyle.
I'm going to write this letter and see what he thinks about this. Yeah.
Well, it's extraordinary, really. I mean, so, you said there that you'd come across it as not even a poltergeist case, but when you're researching, we'll just start with this case, I suppose. How difficult is it separating folklore from documented evidence as part of what you do?
Yeah, it was quite good for this one because it was untouched. Like, no one had really looked at this story before, so it hadn't been passed down orally. It hadn't been passed down as like a folk tale within. There's quite a lot of ghost walks and things around Keighley as a town, but none of them had covered this story. So actually, there wasn't that legacy of people looking into it and adding stuff on and building up this kind of myths around it. All I had was contemporary newspaper reports to start with, which were particularly good because there were a lot of Yorkshire newspapers then, and they all sent their own reporters to Keighley to dig into it and try and find it out. So you get that multiple voices right at the start. And then, because of how the case progresses, sometimes when I find a case, all I have is those newspaper reports. So it's quite a base kind of level of information. But because of this one and what happened to the woman, who was called Gwen Morley, as I found out, the fact she was taken down to the Psychic College in London to be investigated on the back of all this, I then had a full report written by the Psychic College on her and the story. Again, all anonymised, but I'd been able to kind of work that out. So then I've got another source. And then I managed to get in touch with her family. So I've got a personal source about her. Then I found some other books, like more books here. This was about the principal at the Psychic College, and it's written by his secretary, Muriel Hankey. Excellent name.
That is a great name.
But she includes a section in her biography of him about Gwen and the case. So I was managed to pull in all, which as a historian is what you need. You need sources. Your story is only as good as the sources you've got, because otherwise you're just kind of adding. So, but what was great with Keighley, that I had multiple voices telling me the story in different ways, and all adding on it. The principal at the college, who was called James Hewitt Mackenzie, wrote this big report about her. But there's stuff in his secretary's account of the story that he didn't add in the report. So again, it's just adding, another voice to it. It's particularly more locations, more activity, more witnesses.
Wow.
That all factored into it.
That's awesome. So you already had a somewhat awareness of the case, anyhow, didn't you? Is what you said. I mean, so when you really started digging into this, was there a piece of evidence or testimony which really stood out to you the most and to be the most compelling that there was something paranormal or supernatural potentially happening here?
Hewitt Mackenzie's report is the one, really. Hewitt Mackenzie was an interesting guy. He was the principal and founder of the British College of Psychic Science in London. Big fancy house in London.
Psychic science.
He'd made his millions and set up doing this. And I kind of thought, well, obviously he's got a big vested interest in this being a real kind of case of the paranormal. But the more I researched him, the more I realised actually, his whole thing was like debunking all these charlatans, these mediums doing like fake seances post First World War. People were desperate for answers, and that gap was filled by, stage acts basically, but
people have lost a lot of people in that time. Yeah. I mean, it's well documented there that people were looking to reach out to people, because people died in World War One and World War Two, and bodies were never recovered. They never really knew how they died. They didn't even know where they died, and people were just looking for answers, weren't they? And the supernatural and the paranormal and clairvoyance, etc. Spiritualists. It was It was this way of like, okay, well, at least I can get some closure.
Yeah.
A lot of families didn't have that.
Yeah, and so Hewitt Mackenzie's report was because he comes at it from that, although he was a believer, he was looking for fraudulent behaviour, and he was looking to not be made a fool of and to be tricked.
Yeah.
So he was really rigorous, and his report is, there's no emotion in it, there's no sensationalism. The newspapers got it and they blow it up into this big thing, but his report is very, this happened on this day, in this room, these people were stood there, this moved at this day. It's 29 pages, and a lot of it is just a list of things that happened with no, commentary, no sensationalism. A table hitting the ceiling is put next to a cup being knocked off a table. They give an equal kind of rating in there. But there's some stuff in it that is, it is literally unexplainable. There's a few instances that, especially like really weighty kind of things moving, like substantial objects like tables and bits of furniture and being witnessed by multiple people moving and things. So there were definitely things within that report that I thought, there's something obviously highly unusual going on here.
Yeah, it really is extraordinary, isn't it? Yeah. Would you probably say that, or was there something else that probably, amongst the research and investigative notes that you uncovered, that really changed the way you personally viewed the case?
Yeah. I think that finding that report and then finding out who she was, obviously adds a huge kind of other avenue of research I could go down. Once I'd managed to pin down exactly who she was, I could get into her, family history and what her background was, how she'd ended up in the mills and what she did afterwards and all those things. So yeah, getting her name, and finding those kind of family connections. She had a really interesting, family history. Her parents and things were interesting characters. Actually, one was from Selby, East Yorkshire.
Yeah, not a million miles away. No. Well, I mean, it's interesting that you said that, because I was going to mention about like one thing that your podcast does really well, because it is so historically centered, is that you do a really sort of good job of that. They're not just ghost stories that you're telling, but they're events that affect real people.
Yeah.
And do you think like modern audiences often forget that these ghost stories that they're looking to listen to and scare themselves, that they're actually affecting real people?
And I think the people actually who are there and witnessing it and things are happening to them, obviously it's not a nice thing for a lot of people. It's not something you'd kind of want to happen. In the Keithley case in particular, Gwen, was about to be evicted, was probably going to be locked up in an asylum and never seen again. Like, her options were very, very limited as to what to do with this thing that was, whether you think it's paranormal or not, it was happening to and around her, and she didn't have any options. So it's easy to, like I said, dive in and get all kind of sensational and get excited about being scared by something. But there was a real person who was having a really bad time at the centre of that story. And thankfully, through the Psychic College and Arthur Conan Doyle, she was able to be helped. And, she did go on to, get married and have kids and live a normal life.
That's amazing, isn't it?
But if the mill manager had sacked her instead of writing his letter to Arthur Conan Doyle, the story could have been very different. It might not have followed the path that it did. And especially when I didn't know who she was, I end up researching loads and loads of potentials and things, and it doesn't take long. If you're looking into like a working class community, you get tragedy. It's just life was difficult, for most people who didn't have money. So I can remember finding, like women that had killed themselves and all these like tales. Oh God, I hope, that's horrible. And I hope that's not the story I'm going to have to tell in this series. So it was a relief in the end to find her and find that, she was all right in the end. And I have since spoken to her like grandchildren and great grandchildren. And they've, it's been really, I think they were slightly baffled by what on earth I was doing. You really know your grandma? Well, have I got a story to tell you?
I'm only doing a podcast on it.
Because it hadn't really been passed down through the family, the story. It wasn't like a big known thing. It wasn't like something that was spoken.
Wow,
there was a vague awareness of it. Like they had the story probably a bit muddled and a bit wrong in cases. The wrong author, or that Arthur Conan Doyle had gone to stay with them in Keighley and he'd sorted it out. They'd kind of got snippets of it, but they had no idea the depth and the detail and what exactly had happened to her.
Yeah. I mean, you said there a minute ago about like how the newspaper took his report and it was greatly exaggerated, as is often the case with a lot of these things. Do you think by unfortunately sensationalising a lot of these cases, we end up dismissing genuine phenomenon? Do you think that happens a lot?
Yeah, I mean, there must be an awful lot of stuff happens to people who would never say anything.
Yeah.
Because of that fear of it being sensationalised and, people taking the piss or whatever it would be. There must be, what we hear, I guess, will be the absolute tip of the iceberg.
And especially from the time period you're looking at, like you say, there was a real risk you'd be shipped off to an asylum somewhere. It's bad enough now people don't want to talk about it because they're worried about being ridiculed, but it'd been quite a lot worse if you were at risk of being locked away.
Maybe it is better now. Maybe people ask people to talk about things more perhaps than they would have done then.
I think it
there is some of that. I think there is some of that. I think some people are a little more comfortable about talking about it, even if they're not going to talk about their own experiences or anything like that. But I think people are interested in at least, like looking into it or researching it, or they have just an interest in it because, I don't know, they might find it scary, and people like looking into it the same reason they might like it enjoy watching horror movies because it gives them a thrill and it gives them a bit of a scare. But I think there is still definitely that element of, we've had some stories submitted to us for our podcast where people have said, I don't want my name, though. Even though they're literally, we wouldn't say, oh yeah, well, this is John who lives on, Chapel Road on, postcodes, blah, blah. We would never do that, and we would never get those details anyway. But such is the strong feeling of these people that they don't want to be identified in any way, that even just using their first name is the only way we would identify them anyway. They still don't even want to share that.
Yeah, I suppose it's like your family and friends, and people keep things so close, don't they? You might just not want to have any association with it. Yeah, so exactly. I can see that. Yeah, but like I say, it probably was worse in the past.
Definitely.
You've got a weird mix, I think, with paranormal things. You have some people, again, we've seen them on the ghost hunt. There's so many people who are desperate that they've got some gift, or they're psychic, or they're this or that, or seeing something around every corner that nobody else is seeing. But then on the other hand, you've got that some people just want nothing to do with it, or if they do tell the story, they want it to be completely anonymous.
Yeah, which I totally get. And like I say, there's definitely that other side where people so keen for it to be true and it to have happened to them, and that I've definitely seen that. I've only been on one kind of ghost hunt paranormal event in my life, which was very interesting and came on the back of the Keighley Poltergeist. But I didn't have anything particularly interesting. Oh no, not interesting, but nothing paranormal happened to me on the case.
Well, you can always guarantee something interesting will happen with this kind of people.
I mean, they were lovely. It was like, the guys that did it was a really interesting night. We're in some underground kind of shopping centre. A Victorian underground shopping arcade. So, like, the cheap shops were downstairs.
Is that in Leeds?
No, it's Keighley itself, That's why they'd got in touch and said, come along. Because I think I said in the podcast, like, I probably did do a Ouija board as a kid, but pissing around, Whereas we did a proper Ouija board and, spoke to ghosts in Keighley. Which was really interesting for me, because I just wanted to get a feel for that, what it would have been like for Gwen, because Gwen had mediumship sessions as part of her, like, helping her, and I wondered what that's like to sit around in the dark and to see. And it really was interesting, because obviously in that situation we all had our fingers on the tables. Have you ever done that? Where you put your fingers on and it wobbles and it was wobbling. It went onto one leg. It was doing all sorts, and people were like going mad, like loving it, like it's amazing. I was like, just imagine if this table slowly levitated to the ceiling and then slowly levitated back down. it just puts into context. Because Hugh Mackenzie is so like mundane about it all, but actually, if you think you were sat there and that happened, you wouldn't lose your mind.
Yeah, that's it. Whereas, he's there just writing like it's just anything.
Tables up there again, Gwen.
Tables on the ceiling. Right, I'll just write that down. It's just like it's so pedestrian. Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas you imagine if it happened in that context where people are so hyped for it, it would have been like incredible. Like,
I'd have probably cried and left probably. Your following series, after that was the City of London Poltergeist, and this case involves an allegedly haunted office, flying objects, slamming doors, disappearing items. I think the idea of a poltergeist haunting an office feels uniquely unsettling because offices are such ordinary places. We've discussed this kind of thing in our liminal spaces episode, haven't we? Do you think hauntings or this kind of paranormal activity becomes scarier when they happen somewhere relatively mundane?
I suppose it would be, wouldn't it? Yeah. I suppose the thing about an office is you can go home.
Well, I just need a break from the poltergeist. I can't wait till 5.
It being at home is like obviously very personal and there's no escape. So there is something about it being in an office that I guess there would be a relief. And I chose that case. I was looking and looking. I lived in London and worked in London at the City of London Archives for a while, and so I'm quite into London history, and I know how how much is out there and how much you can do. So I thought, actually, London case would be cool. It'd be nice to do one from the city as well, because it's the city is old London. That's Roman London. Like you're going back.
Yeah, exactly.
If I find a location there, I can really tell whatever story you want me to tell. So that's why I chose it. But something happening in an office is quite unusual for a poltergeist case. They tend to be domestic. Gwen's, there was stuff going off in the mill, but they tend to be modern. Poltergeist stories are usually always in someone's home.
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought it being in an office, it takes away that, sense of it being, something about it being someone in their own home and tricking people coming in or something. I thought, I'll do an office, like it'd be interesting to see. And also, again, a bit like the Gwen story, the office and the business were anonymised because they didn't want to upset the business interests. So I thought, again, I'll be able to kind of pin down exactly where it was, and then I can tell the story of that building or that location.
I think what makes it so fascinating really is that when it's in someone's home, the only real witnesses to it, often anyway, are the people that live there.
Yeah.
And you're always going to have that thing of but regardless of how many people live there, they could all just be in on fabricating this story. And I think when it happens in quite a public place, whether that's a workplace or whatever, is that you've got the increased chance of multiple witnesses that are all disconnected, other than the fact that the main thread running between them is they all work in this same place. So if there were multiple stories of this extraordinary phenomena happening and occurring, they'd all have to be in on it. But then
exactly.
To what end and to why is the question.
Have you got this jacket unzipping on CCTV yet?
Oh, that's it.
About workplace
honestly, you see, someone actually messaged us and said what you should do is you should unzip the jacket halfway and see if it zips back up.
Oh yeah, that'd be
and good. That's a good idea, and I haven't done it yet. But honestly, I've been so busy at work. But work's been mad just recently that I haven't even had a chance. But every now and then I check on the jacket and it's not gone back down again.
Oh, has it not? Okay.
And it's been okay. But I do need to mention to my boss, I just need to say, look, a few weeks back, just if you've still got the footage, I don't know how often it wipes itself or whatever, but go back. And I know that he did say that it has some element of night vision on the camera, but I don't know how strong it'll be and whether it'll penetrate the darkness enough to see the jacket. But you've seen the jacket, haven't you?
Yeah.
And
I moved the zip as well. It's not
loose.
It's not loose at all. No.
And I would love to see that. Actually, there's a really good point that you bring that up there, because I've spoken before about workplace. It's like, we're only a small team where I work. There's no benefit for us to do it. Like the people I work with aren't those types of people either. That just play stupid pranks on each other. We don't do that. We all get on really, really well, and we work we're just such a small team. We have such a good laugh. But the way it started, it was just like, well, Why would he start it? Why would my boss just turn around and say, "Who's had this jacket on?"
Yeah.
It'd
be a very odd prank, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It'd be better if he... Well, it won't be better, but if he was looking to pull someone's leg, it'd be more believable to say, "Did you leave that door open upstairs?"
Yeah, something big, like...
Yeah.
Yeah, or did you leave those lights on upstairs? Because it's kind of like... I don't know, it just seems more classic of poltergeist activity,
Yeah,
doesn't
exactly.
it?
Yeah, just the zip coming down on the coat is such an odd
Bizarre.
thing.
Yeah, you choose something big, don't you?
Something a bit more spectacular.
Yeah, something more substantial that it's noticeable that it's either one thing or the other. The light's on or the light's off. So if you turn around and said, "Who left these lights on?" No one did. And it's like, oh, well, that's a big change because it's noticeable. It's noticeable that the lights were off and now they're on. But yeah, and actually that brings me to my next thing. Actually, is that in this case with the City of London poltergeist that you I'm going to ask you just to sort of quickly run through it. But one of the things which I said was like objects moving and doors slamming. That kind of phenomenon appears repeatedly across poltergeist history and activity. And it seems to be quite a prominent thing in this case. So would you mind just sort of giving us a brief summary of the alleged activity in this case, and why do you think those kind of manifestations are so common?
So it was an office, and it was the office of a gold mining company who had a gold mine in Brazil, as you do. And this was their like head office. So it's a big office employing tens of people, and there was a guy from the office, and there was this weird stuff had been going on, happening for weeks, and he went to speak to this guy he knew and said, "Some weird stuff's happening in the office, will you come and have a look?" And it was the guy who went to have a look who wrote the report about it. And it was things flying around, knocks, then there was a voice at the end, a very foul-mouthed voice, swearing and shouting, effing and jeffing. Then they had these other like really weirdly specific things that I remember when I first heard about them, I was like, that sounds... it started getting me suspicious. There was like a bottle, and one day there was a coin in the middle of the bottle that didn't fit through the neck. I was like, that's mad, isn't it? And it was a French coin. I was like, oh, this is a London office. What's there a French coin? I was like, well, whatever. And then there was one where this magazine flew across the room, and then the magazine, visibly to several people, opened on the page showing an illustration of a ghost pushing someone off a cliff. I was like, oh, it's on the nose, this ghost, isn't it? But it started to sound really like performative, which made me suspicious. And it went on for weeks and weeks, and no one ever really got to the bottom of what had happened, and that was it, and that was the story. So obviously for me, it was I wanted to find out the office, the company, where it happened, and the more I dug into it, I found a few newspaper reports where there was a magician wrote into the newspaper and said, the bottle, it's a French coin because French pennies were thinner than English pennies, and you could bend them and get them into a bottle. It's a magic trick. It was a known magic trick that was done and performed. And then I was like, oh that's a shame.
Yeah, because otherwise that's great evidence, isn't it?
Why would it be
coin
French?
manages to get in the bottle.
Yeah.
It's a great piece of evidence, but such a shame.
Because that was quite a good one that showed... I rarely get that kind of insight to the phenomena. Someone at the time debunking it for me. It's like, brilliant. Because otherwise I'd have no idea. I don't know about the French penny trick from 1901. It's not on my radar. But the history of the building was perfect for that sense. So there was a Brazilian gold mine, big into slavery. When slavery was abolished, still kept it going, a horrible, horrible company. Thousands of people died working in the kind of gold mines, and they're obviously filtering all this money back to London and living big on it.
Yeah. I remember your coverage.
Come on, here we go.
I remember your coverage in the episode that they were even promising the slaves that, come Christmas we'll let a load of you go, and then that kind of thing never really happened. Yeah. And it's just like, oh Jesus Christ! It's how harsh can you be, man?
Yeah, I think I said in the podcast I'm pretty glad these guys have been haunted.
You did.
If they are. And then it turned out
it really.
Yeah.
So the office was Finsbury House, which is still there, beautiful. It's vacant. If you want to buy it, I think it's £9 million.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to get a new podcast head office.
We need new headquarters. There we go.
But it was relatively modern. It was built in the 1890s. But before that, there'd been a chapel on there, a famous Methodist chapel that had been really big on abolition. So you'd had slaves on that site in the 50 years before this, coming over, former slaves from America, giving these like rousing speeches to get people on board with abolition, saying how obviously terrible slavery was and how their lives had been. It's like, you couldn't, it fits so well historically. And then before that, it'd been the site of Bethlehem Hospital, which is where we get the term Bedlam from, for people obviously suffering with mental illnesses have been there. It's like, well, if you were going to tell like a ghost story based on history of a building, this is the history you'd choose. It was like too perfect. Yeah, so the history was great.
If you put that in a novel, people would be like, oh, that's a bit
get out of it.
It was an old mental hospital. Yeah.
It's a bit like the 80s movies. Everybody bought a house on an ancient Native American
it was
burial ground.
So the history told a brilliant story, but the actual thing was you've got these kind of sense of someone was doing magic tricks in there, which makes you think, well, maybe there was stuff happening alongside this, or maybe there was someone kind of orchestrating some of this a bit more. So I kind of lent on that one more I can't explain how the kettle was thrown, but given there was someone in there, maybe someone just threw it. And there was something going on about it being a bit of a Catholic CV kind of thing as well.
Yeah,
it was reported by a Catholic priest, and I wondered whether there was some like religious element to it as well. Something within the office, maybe it's like, let's wind up the Catholics. So it felt like there was something else going on there that I just couldn't quite kind of, when I settled on that one, that there was anything paranormal in the end. It felt too much, like I say, performative.
Yeah.
Which always worries me in a case where it feels very human.
Well, I think it comes back to what you said, Lee, earlier, is that as soon as you come across one thing where you realise that it's someone it's someone doing it rather than it's paranormal, it immediately debunks everything else anyway, doesn't it?
It certainly throws that kind of
because you
doubt.
start to question everything, don't you?
Yeah.
So it's like the coin in the bottle. Initially, that was probably some of its best evidence, but when you find that the best evidence is not genuine and it's fraudulent, then you just think, well, that was probably your best bit of evidence. Chances are the rest of this is nonsense then.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we'll never really know whether or not something did throw the kettle or someone did throw the kettle.
And there were weird things about it that, like, I can't explain. Like, actually, the kettle wasn't just thrown. The kettle went down the corridor and round a corner, which obviously you can't, you can't put spin on a kettle.
I'm real good at curling a kettle.
Catch it on the inside and get it bending around the corner. That can't happen. But there was just enough kind of doubt put on it for me to kind of to put it down the realm of office pranks. City boys having a laugh.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing as well is that the city of London is layered with centuries of death, plague, crime. I think it seems obvious to think that history itself plays a role in paranormal experiences, but it's simply because it has that influence, really. To what extent do you think that is the case in this case? Do you think the dark history has sort of lent itself to influencing or concocting a story here, or do you think that maybe, because of the Bedlam Hospital thing, that there is a potential that there was something there? Do you think there is? Your drawn conclusion, do you think it's a mixture of both, or do you lean more into?
I think I lent on that one definitely more into it being that, but I did wonder whether the history would have played into it, because obviously we're looking back at it 125 years ago now. But in 1901, there were people working in that office who were alive when slavery wasn't abolished and where their company was still using slaves. So I did play with the idea about whether there was this kind of unconscious guilt, or especially the fact it had been this chapel, and people would have remembered the chapel and those speakers coming, whether there was someone had a bit of a grudge against. I don't know. I wondered whether there was some human element that was part of its historical story that could have explained it. Like, I don't know, maybe one of the cleaning staff in the building had been a massive, Methodist kind of anti-abolition, and then this gold mining company had moved in and were using slaves, so maybe they were pissed off about it, and they were doing so. I don't know. There's all these potential other theories that do lean on the history, but without being paranormal.
Yeah, very true. Very true. So moving from the south, moving a little bit more north. We're going to move to your next case, which was Sunderland.
Yes.
So quickly again, if you just summarise slightly for some of the listeners who haven't come across the Poltergeist Project podcast yet, what was the Sunderland Poltergeist?
So again, I did London after Keighley, thinking it'd be nice to do one like London. And I thought, well, I want a decent geographic spread. I did say, this was a UK-based thing, so I was actually looking for a Scottish case.
Yeah.
But I got to Sunderland and I came across this story and thought, oh, that'll do. Like, it's too good to leave it. It was also early. It was like 1840, which was 80 years earlier than I'd done before, and a very different time to like High Victorian, Edwardian. I thought this will be an interesting one to do. So it stemmed around, again, very working class, poor area of Sunderland, and there was a 12-year-old girl, and they'd just moved house, and she came home to her mum and said, "I've just seen Jesus in my bedroom." I was like, oh.
It's a bold
curious. Fair enough. And then it just started, so you've got Jesus appearing in this like slum house in Sunderland, and it just spiraled into this absolutely crazy story where this girl is there's all this knocking in the house. She's quoting massive tracts of the Bible. There's the voices heard. There's water pouring from the ceiling. It was absolute chaos for weeks and weeks in this house. And I was like, well, this is, obviously I need to find out about this. I've got another book here. Doesn't work so well on a podcast. But so there's a guy called William Reed Clanny, who was like head of the health board, really respected doctor. And he got hold of this case and he was all in, like fully taken in, absolutely invested in it being real. And he wanted other people to kind of have that same feeling towards it. So he interviewed all the witnesses, so both the parents, the doctors that had been to see her when she was unwell, the neighbours, anyone really who'd had any connection to it, and he published this book. And the book is basically just witness statement after witness statement, which is a really interesting approach. Rather than writing a narrative of the story, he let people have their own voices and tell the story. And it's, there are parts of it written in that kind of dialect where it's kind of tricky to get through. So unusually for a case, especially for an 1840s case, I have the voices of the people who were there telling me what happened, not a newspaper telling me or a reporter telling me. Yeah. Actually, her parents. So that really intrigued me about the Sunderland one. So I kind of, I loved it as a story. It was a really interesting one. It's absolutely wild. It's not, obviously it's a very religiously based story.
Well, you even start that series pretty much reading scripture.
Which is exactly what
that's
what
what she
quoted,
said. Yeah, exactly. It is an extraordinary case, and I think it's probably safe to say, based on what I heard in the case, is that clearly religion was heavily the influence behind some of this activity. But I think back then as well, the sort of Victorian and earlier had a real fascination with spiritualism and the paranormal. Do you think that the culture at the time was a direct influence to the activity that was going on there?
Yeah, and it's the 1840s, so everyone was Christian.
Yeah.
And not just Christian as in went to Sunday school and church once a month, was Christian, like really fully. It's not even a case of believing, knew that, that was, they were facts. But it is pre-spiritualism. It's pre that kind of rise which came from America to this country in like the 1860s. So it's pre that kind of interest. But there's something about the 1840s, it feels like the 1640s.
I was going to say, like the dark ages.
Yeah, it's a real step back, and the mentality is a step back further than even the date. So I think there is that sense of, it's so real that, Jesus could appear in your house in Sunderland. Like, it's not as wild as it would be now. Like, it would be laughed off as a joke, wouldn't it? Like, people see Jesus in a piece of toast, don't they? And it's it's a comedy piece in a newspaper, isn't it? Whereas then it wouldn't have been.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of that from, some of the reporting is kind of anti it, saying, it's, kind of farcical.
Yeah.
But within the community, I don't think it was. And actually, the way that story developed is that it has been picked up by another podcast who, in my opinion, did quite a bad job on it. That they picked out the headlines, the spectacular, and told the story in that way. And it ended with, and nobody knew how it all, and that was it. But they left out loads of the stuff that is like, it sounds like a 12-year-old girl talking. You know, it sounds like a child. It doesn't sound like the voice of Jesus. Because you've got the voice of Jesus, Virgin Mary, multiple saints. All these voices are appearing and they were left out. But you do get this sense of, actually, there's a 12-year-old girl here telling... There's some really kind of quite amusing aspects of that story. Where she's having conversations with neighbours, telling them about all sorts. It's actually quite funny. And the more I got into it, I was like, and actually, some of the witnesses say, yeah, this was happening at Mary's house, but at my house, Jesus appeared to me as well. And there's this other girl who's actually just died, but she was also having visions. And it's like, oh, okay, so this isn't just a poltergeist case on one girl in one house. There's a religiously based poltergeist haunting the whole of Sunderland.
Yeah.
Well, that's
just going around knocking on doors, basically.
Yeah.
So, in this case, then, coming back to the Sunderland poltergeist, how does this story categorise as a poltergeist case? Then,
I think it's the element of the voices and the knocking, and there are things kind of moving, water appearing, which are typical of poltergeist cases. Yeah. But it is unusual in the amount of visions and the voices. The vocalizations are lengthy and full, like, conversations with the poltergeist or whatever it is that's causing this. And I only consider there's that kind of idea of, poltergeists being like tricksters and kind of impersonators. And was this, another spirit pretending to be all these people to play a trick on these, there was a few kind of aspects to it that I considered around that idea.
I think as well, for me, when I was listening to this case, was, although you've got that kind of activity going on, it was a very desperate time in Sunderland because of some of the things that were going on in that part of the country at the time, down to polio. Is that right?
Cholera.
That's right. Sorry, I do apologise.
No, you're right.
So how do you feel? For those that aren't aware of the case and haven't listened to it, how did that really factor into this case? Do you think?
Yeah, and I was totally unaware of it. Like I've heard of cholera, but it's not something I was kind of expected to be telling this story of when I started researching this like poltergeist case in Sunderland. But it turned out in the early 1830s there'd been a massive cholera outbreak, and Sunderland had been the first place that it hit. And the equivalent, based on population sizes, more people died in that cholera epidemic than died in the COVID pandemic in the UK. So it was like serious. It was a big thing that I had no idea about. And also the guy who wrote that book about Mary Jobson and the poltergeist was the head of the health board. So he had directly led on Sunderland's response to the cholera epidemic in the town. Not wholly successfully.
Yeah.
And Mary herself, I think, would have been 4 at the time of the outbreak. And she had sisters her mum was pregnant at the time. And I remember COVID, and, obviously.
Yeah.
And that time, especially in those early days, it was scary, wasn't it, for lots of people? You didn't know.
So much uncertainty.
You didn't know what was happening.
Reports of mass graves being dug in Iran, I think it was.
Yeah.
There was a real air of...
And, how are we getting it and what we're going to do? I remember, my dad used to, wash his change. He'd buy paper in the morning, he'd come back and put his change in the sink and wash it.
Yeah.
And it's all these things. And I had a newborn at that point, at that first, lockdown. And just the fear of all that was terrifying. And I just thought, well, actually, especially then, information would have been absolutely baffling, wouldn't it? At least we were getting it on the news and the internet. We could find out, and science is where it is now. And
we understand more about what diseases are and things like that, yeah.
So it's a whole community where people were dropping dead all over the place. And you've got a kid and you're a family. And so, maybe understandable that you start to lean on religion in quite an intense way. And the legacy of that.
And that was of the time as well. It's interesting that the book describes it as a miracle, essentially. It's a miraculous case, and it's not this poltergeist case. So that, because even the book leans into the religious.
And I think Mary was ill alongside all this, so she was bedbound and couldn't do anything, and all this stuff was happening around her. And it ends with, a voice tells everyone to leave the room, and 15 minutes later tells them to come back, and Mary's sat fully dressed in bed, like a miracle has happened. She's well again, and she's back exactly how she was before all this happened. So there was a miraculous kind of element to it, and that sense of, getting better, and, especially with the legacy of the cholera epidemic in Sunderland, which did hit Sunderland in a very specific way, in that Sunderland was like locked down. People couldn't go in and out of it for a period to try and contain it within Sunderland. It failed, it got into other ports, and then it spread, got to London, then it was everywhere. But in the early days, they tried to kind of lock it down to just Sunderland, which again, it seems very familiar story to what we've all kind of lived through, that sense of trying to keep it in specific communities. If it is there, let's not let people travel, let's not let people mix. And we're doing exactly the same thing in the 1840s.
Yeah, exactly. In this particular case then, during your research, did you find any witnesses to the activity which you found to be particularly credible one way or the other, from trying to disprove this miracle or poltergeist activity, or prove this poltergeist activity?
What's really good about it is full of credible witnesses. Like Reid Clanny, who wrote the book, is himself, although he didn't witness much personally, he witnessed a few things, but he draws on his medical contacts and he speaks to the doctors that were seeing her because she was ill, and it includes their testimony. So they're medical, qualified, sensible men, they're not kind of, neighbours or family getting whipped up by the hysteria, and they go on record stating that these things were happening, and that, I did hear the voice of Jesus telling me about whatever was going on. So, the witnesses are really credible throughout.
I like that he addresses that in the very beginning of the book, that, basically saying, I appreciate some people just won't sort of believe this. Yeah. And there's a really nice quote, actually. The prejudices of education are too frequently opposed to truth. Yeah. I really like that.
Yeah. It's surprisingly modern. Considering it's 1840, you think, God, that's going to be a tough read. Yeah. It's amazingly, really stands up. Yeah. Reid Clanny knew it was going to go down how it went down. It would be received as it was received, and he addresses it. He preempts it, that thing of all the great and the good are gonna take the piss here, but you weren't there, you didn't witness it. Yeah.
And the story's got to be told regardless. Yeah. And what I love about the way that this book has been printed is that it's literally not gone, okay, well, we'll just retype all this. They've literally just printed it. Yeah, it's just scanned, isn't it? And reprinted, and you can tell it's from old parchment paper with ink that's not fully dried. And
so that's the 1851 edition that's just been scanned and reprinted. Yeah. So
it's just extraordinary, isn't it? Absolutely extraordinary. What a great book. And I love that. The fact that you can see the ink on this side because it's been wet. And what a great book. Yeah, I bet that's an extraordinary read.
It's really good, and it's interesting because of how Reid Clanny chose to do it through witness statements. And I could see now why people who have looked at it have got it wrong before. Because some of the witnesses slightly contradict each other, which you'd expect. He was interviewing them after the events, obviously, and it would be more suspicious if all the witness statements kind of corroborated perfectly in terms of timeline, but they don't.
Yeah.
But there's some mad stuff in there. She was predicting the assassination of Queen Victoria, which then happened 4 weeks later. There was an assassination attempt on her. Yeah. According to that timeline. Who knows?
Yeah.
There's a lamb just appearing out of nowhere and walking through the room. There's all sorts of
that's extraordinary.
Weird and wonderful things going on that lots of people witnessed. So who knows? I think again, at the end of this one, I did kind of come to the conclusion that this was a community that were traumatized by this epidemic, and there was other things. They were very religious. There was an awful lot going on. that meant I just found it really hard to kind of buy into this being paranormal. But there's certainly, again, things in there that I can't explain. There's like a big painting of celestial painting, stars and moons and stuff just appeared on the ceiling one day. I was like, well, I mean, that can't happen. But I can't say how it did happen.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, and that's there's some really strange encounters there, isn't there? And strange phenomena, and again, it's hard to know whether or not this is a case of, well, people witnessed it, but were they just all in on it, or were these genuine phenomena that people witnessed?
Yeah.
And it's another one of those things where you'll never really know unless something crazy happens to yourself.
For me as well, I'm not an expert in this case by any means, but I think given the time, given the religious element to this, I don't think it would have been a case of several people being willing to lie about these supposed miracles or
I suppose some people as well
activity.
Being very religious to maybe, I mean, I don't know, but maybe to fake such a thing might have been blasphemous.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I fully believe that the witness statements in that book are given genuinely and honestly. Yeah. I don't think there's any line in it. I think they asked, but whether what they witnessed was paranormal or whether they were witnessing things beyond that.
If there was some collective hallucination due to trauma, that's believable. But I don't think people would have outright lied about it.
And there's a sense of editing. Reed Clanney only includes witnesses who believed it was a miracle.
Yeah.
And I did find in the course of the research another doctor who is named in the book but doesn't give his account, and his account is quite different.
Really?
To the story. He was invited into Mary's room and sat waiting to hear this voice and this knocking, and said to Mum, "Why is it not happening?" And her Mum said, "Oh, well, problem is you are looking at her quite a lot." To which point he was like, okay. So he looked away, and sure enough, the knocking started. And although he couldn't see how she was or how it was happening, it was interesting that obviously under direct observation, no, it doesn't work like that. You have to be not looking at it. And then he was never invited back. So he gives his account 20, 30 years later when there's a bit of a revival in the press about it. He says, right, you lot are all reprinting that nonsense, basically. This is how it went down and what happened. So obviously that book is biased, it's purposely biased. Yeah. So we didn't at the time get that account. Well, Mary herself went on to live again, relatively not. She died quite young actually. She was only 57 when she died, and had apparently been quite ill. But she seemingly disassociated herself with the case and anything to do with it. Seemed quite embarrassed about it. A guy from the press went to interview her about it, and she didn't want to talk about it. In fact, she tried to pinch his copy of that book to destroy it because she was. I don't think it had a massive print run. I don't think there were lots of copies of it knocking around, so she was quite keen for it to be gone, so the story to disappear.
Interesting.
Fortunately, it's not disappeared. Now,
yeah. I've just done a few episodes on it, so thank God.
But it's history; it's important.
Yes,
these are real people. These are stories that aren't told.
Quite right.
Let's do it. These are genuine communities, and these things actually happen to them, whether you believe it's paranormal or not. It actually happened to real people. So let's tell them.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really a good place to sort of summarise these three cases, because I hadn't heard of any of them until I listened to your podcast. And they're good stories, whether they are just stories or in the sense that they are works of fiction that people have jumped on or whatever, or these are genuine accounts of people experiencing paranormal phenomena. But that's always up to the listener, isn't it? But either way, they are extraordinary cases, and they're very well documented and retold through your podcast. Your follow-up series to the Sunderland Poltergeist, which might be completed by the time this episode certainly airs on our podcast, is the Edinburgh Poltergeist. Now, I'll ask you to sort of go into it in depth because I'd like people to listen to it, seeing as it is currently ongoing as well anyway. But just a very quick, brief outline. I know that you said earlier, and you'd already said it in your podcast as well, was that you wanted an episode, a subject to take you to Scotland.
Yeah.
What is the Edinburgh Poltergeist about?
Yeah, I was specifically looking for a Scottish story. Researching Scottish history is very different to researching English history. When I did my masters, they were literally like separate units. You couldn't do them combined.
Wow.
Like English and Welsh history, they work together, but Scottish is totally different systems. So I thought, well, that'd be a fun challenge, and I'll have a go at that. I know Edinburgh fairly well as a kind of tourist, I suppose. And I kind of expected, because there's so much haunted history of Edinburgh, that every story will have been done. Like, there's nothing I can add to that. And then I found this case, and I was Googling around. I was like, well, no one seems to have done this, so I'll do it. So yeah, it's Rose Street in Edinburgh, and it's a tenement flat. Again, it's poor, kind of working class people in this, what at the time was quite a rough area of Edinburgh. And yeah, strange things happening, stuff moving, the usual knocks, bangs, stuff moving. Again, we have water pouring again, which is an interesting, the woman and her granddaughter, actual great-granddaughter, who live with her, get like soaked by this water that appears from nowhere in the flat.
Bizarre,
and then
with any story, I found it really weird when you have this repeated.
A couple of times. Yeah.
Like quite an odd detail. It's not something you'd immediately, if you were inventing a story, that's not something you'd immediately come up with.
No.
And when you get all these cases that are massively disconnected in geography and even time period.
Yeah, massively time. This is 1875, the Rose Street one, so it's kind of in between my 1840s and my 20th century ones. So
and it is a strange thing, again, with poltergeist activity or whatever, you'd say, I think I've got a poltergeist. Well, why? Well, because doors keep slamming and all the rest. I don't think you'd turn around and go, well, a load of water just fell from the ceiling.
Drenched.
Yeah, one day I just stood there and all of a sudden this load of water just fell from the ceiling and drenched me. Why would you, I've never heard that.
Yeah, and it comes up in some modern, there's definitely like 60s, 70s cases of it being like, 1960s, 70s of it being a thing. Water coming down walls, and so there is something about it. It is a thing that kind of happens. And so Rose Street kind of rumbled on like that for a few weeks, and then the people in the flat moved out, and then the press got onto it and started investigating it. Again, the woman at the centre was anonymised, and her great-granddaughter who was living with her was anonymised in the press. But yeah, I'm live in the research stage. I have found them and I have named them. And yeah, I'm working on that at the moment. The woman at the centre of it, they tracked her down and they said, what do you think was going on? And she blamed it on the Wizard of the North.
Oh. Naturally.
I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Listen to the podcast to find out who on earth. There was a genuine Wizard of the North.
Wow.
And that was who she blamed this whole story on.
I think our friend Rachel went on a couple of dates with him.
Yeah.
She did date a wizard, that's true.
Well, it might have been the Wizard of the North.
Wizard of the North, yeah.
I don't know if it was anything so grand.
We'll ask Rachel when we get back home.
But yeah, the research is ongoing. I am waiting. It's one of those sad things. I'm waiting on a death certificate.
Oh, nice. That's always a nice thing to turn
up. There's something I've not been able to find one element of it, so I don't often have to do it, but I've had to order a death certificate for this one.
Well, that actually brings me to some of my next sort of questions, really, is what's your practice then for researching these cases? So, like, because they're also spread out, not just in time, but geographically as well. I mean, I know that, our friend Mike, who, he just lives in the History Centre and the various places in Hull, because he's predominantly a Hull and Yorkshire historian and travelling to places that he wants to research outside of Hull. He doesn't go too far that he can't hop on a train or jump on a bus or whatever. And it's essentially his job to do that. But you're covering areas, we're talking London, we're talking Edinburgh, we're talking two ends of the country. How do you research these?
Yeah, it's tricky. I can't physically go to the local archive centres in these places. I work full time. I've got family.
Exactly.
I'd love to, but I don't have that luxury to be able to do it. So it is an awful lot of what's available online and ordering. I brought a stack of books today. Copies. I'm buying like stuff on eBay. And,
some of these look really old. There's no way these are
all like ex-library stock. So it's. So I tend to start on newspapers. Thankfully in this country we've got an incredible archive of newspapers, local press that you can get online.
Yeah.
Visit your local library. You can usually access these things for free through your library card, wherever you live.
Well, I mean...
I should say that working for libraries, but, it's an amazing what you can get with a library card still.
Well, I mean, it's extraordinary as well, though, isn't it? That like the practice of going to a library is just a dissolving part of culture, isn't it? Because, I mean, I can't believe how much even just giving something a simple Google search has been eroded since the arrival of AI and ChatGPT. Someone the other day in my wife's work wanted to know if their current Apple charger for their MacBook worked with the new one. And my wife turned around and went, I'll find out for you, meaning I'll just give it a quick Google.
Yeah.
And this guy just went, oh, no, don't worry, I'll ask ChatGPT. What are you talking about? Just Google it. Why do you need ChatGPT to answer that? But again, it's that constant thing of like, as we move into like the next sort of, generation, if you will, I don't know if that'd be the right word for it, but of research and everything, we erode and the previous. But that's something that, can't be beaten. With the library is the extensive kind of history
and access to those records. Like the newspaper archives are fantastic. Like the British Library newspaper archive is amazing, and it's all available online. You can literally keyword search it as if you were searching Google.
Really,
you put names in, it'll bring you. It takes a bit of like skill to obviously be able to kind of get that down to where you're looking for exactly. So that's a really key source, and then I use the usual popular family history sources, Ancestry, Find My Past, those kind of things, to once I've got a name to drill into their life stories. But then I can find myself going in all sorts of weird directions, like the London one, where I ended up with this mining company in Brazil. Obviously, I'm going into business archives, online business archives from Brazil, trying to pull out. But I'm also getting access to academic research. People had written about that company in the 80s and their relationship with slavery, so I'm able to pull out, what other people have done. Although they're not looking at it from a paranormal perspective, it's relevant to me. As talking about the same topic, and books, whatever I can get hold of that's related. There's some really good. There's a few kind of paranormal archive websites online that you can get hold of. There is one called the Poltergeist Archive.
Nice.
That's quite a decent record. It's got a map of the country. You can click on pins and it'll tell you different stories. And it's basically just transcriptions from the newspapers. So that's quite a good one just for a basic kind of survey.
Yeah.
But that's how it's done. There's no great. There's nothing new, there's nothing radical, nothing kind of incredible that anyone else couldn't do, to be honest. There's nothing special about it. I don't have an amazing archive that I can draw on and do it. It's all using stuff that's out there and anyone can get hold of. Yeah,
and I think that's why I wanted to ask as well, was because when you sort of cover such a broad range of locations, your instant thinking is, well, he must have gone down to London and he's like gone travelling around. And I thought to myself, well, based on what I know how your podcast works, and you've stated this yourself within the podcast that like you do it as and when you can because you're a busy man, you work, you've got family, etc. I was like, there's no way he's going to London. That's it. There's no way he's going to London for weeks to look into this. He puts out the episodes as and when he's got new information. So he's not going to London, getting some information, going back home and recording, then going back to. So I thought to myself, it'd be really interesting to know what your approach is. But I think also, based on how you do your research for your style of podcast, but irregardless, I'm going to ask the question, but what do you think is the biggest mistake paranormal investigators make when they approach a case? I think we mentioned a little bit earlier is that they simply don't do the due diligence of the history.
And I get that. If you've not done it, it's not easy to do, and you will Google it and you'll find what other people have said. Whereas rather than looking at what other people have said, it's kind of looking at what are the contemporary kind of reports and what information is there behind some of those stories and things. So I think that's the main thing from a historical perspective. I want to look into that. I had it a bit with when I did do that kind of paranormal investigation, we did have people coming through on the Ouija board and names coming through, and we had full blown conversations with them about their lives and why they were in the cellar of this kind of shopping arcade in Keighley, and and that was, fantastic, really interesting. And then I think people take that. If you want to believe, you take that and you believe it and you're in.
Yeah.
Whereas I couldn't help myself but come home and put those names into Ancestry and find out. And there's literally no one of that name ever existed in the history of the country. It makes it very tricky then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And
exactly.
again, who knows what's going on in those kind of situations, but I can't help but kind of do the history on it is my big thing, so.
And I think that's ultimately it, isn't it? Is to be led by fact rather than what is perceived fact. It's, we've heard that a lot about some of the places in Hull where it has this history, which turns out that it's a version of a history, and then some of it is just utterly false.
Yeah,
and
but
then,
it quickly becomes history, doesn't it?
Yes.
If your parents have told the same ghost story from your village that that's the haunted house, or that's the old asylum, or that's the old workhouse, or that's where it becomes history, doesn't it? Because it gets told and retold and retold. But
we've got our episode on De Grey Street got a lot of attention because people were looking for a discussion and a conversation around De Grey Street because of its supposed horrible history, which Mike made it very clear that it's nothing more than a work of fiction.
Yeah, and it's quite common, isn't it? And even if it's not that, to that extent, like we mentioned the Pontefract one before, didn't we, actually?
Yeah.
That address, I've
East Drive,
just my head in sometimes. They talk about the history of it and this black monk, and I was like, but it wasn't near the monastery.
No.
It was over a mile away. It's if I'm telling the history of that building in London, I'm going to tell what was on that actual site. If I went a mile away, I could be telling the history of the Tower of London, Buckingham Palace, take your pick. But because it's Pontefract and there isn't that much known history on a 50s council estate, we'll just jump a mile and say it's just a monk out for a walk. It's well, what's he doing? Well,
although this was a question I was going to be asking a little later, but I'm going to ask the question now because we're at a really good time where we can. So, East Drive. Obviously, very reported, documented history of being haunted. Taking that case and various other cases of poltergeist activity, if there's one you could research with, and you was told you would have full access to any history available to it for you to document, research, investigate, etc., what would the one case you'd go for?
Like a modern one, or one that's kind of outside of my remit?
Whether it is historical, what you already cover on your podcast.
Keithley's the most convincing I've had, and if I could really have access to records that I know don't exist, but if I could have access to them, I would. I'd love to have sat with Gwen and had a conversation about it, but she died in 1967 before I was born. So that's the problem. So that would be the record that I'd get. To have those oral histories, or to have that with those. Yeah, because I think there's a lot of contemporary ones. I think the East Drive one, I just don't buy it. If that was a historical case and I was considering it for my podcast, I'd read it and think, no, it's kids messing around, isn't it? There's this gloves doing some orchestrating. They've got visitors. It's they're winding up people coming to the house, and obviously they've made an industry out of it, which is fair enough. It's fun, I'm sure, to go and do those kind of ghost things there, but I just don't buy it.
Have you done much research into a case like that before? Just out of pure, again, not for the podcast, but just out of sheer
loads
curiosity?
Of historical cases of similar kind of things going on and happening. And I've not done them as a series because I can kind of write them off. They usually, you go down and down the stories, all this amazing phenomena is reported, and then 6 months later, the maid in the house has admitted to doing it all. Yeah. It's I can't really. She's beat me to it. I don't need to kind of do that one. It's explainable. Yeah,
that's true. So, in terms of historical hauntings, modern hauntings or whatever, what would you say is the one you've encountered outside your podcast, where you've thought, okay, that either is scary or it's a little bit disturbing, it's a little bit that kind of really freaks me out. Have you ever had one where you kind of think to yourself, that actually creeps me the hell out?
It's not massively, to be honest. No, because I think I'm always looking at it from that perspective of what I would do and the history on it and where I would go with it. There's been a few on the like Uncanny Cold Cases series, the kind of current one.
Yeah.
I think like the last one about the Poltergeist. I've forgotten the location of it now.
I don't keep.
It's literally, it's like the current, it's like the current one. But again, it's modern. To me, it's full of like problems about problems about people, not problems about ghosts.
Yeah.
If anyone's listening to it, they'll know what I'm talking about. I think there's so much going on there that is not paranormal, but is worrying from a human perspective. Some of that phenomenon that I think has been picked up by other people already. But no, I'm always so keen, and I don't find it scary anymore like I did in the 90s.
Yeah.
I just, I would want it to happen and would want to witness it and experience it and see it, and then I'd try and rationalise it.
Be careful what you wish for.
Like, bring it on, I'm ready. That would be it. I'd love to kind of have that kind of moment. Maybe not in the actual moment.
Yeah, well, this is it, isn't it? I mean, to be fair, you have mentioned just then, and you've mentioned through your episodes, you make it very clear you're very much you certainly lean heavier into being a skeptic. But have you ever come across any cases which you initially believed were paranormal, but then were easily explainable to not be paranormal, or vice versa? Have you ever had somewhere you've gone in with the intent that, okay, this is most probably a bit like East Drive, for example, just as an example, but where you thought to yourself, that's clearly a load of rubbish, and then you started doing the research and you've gone like, oh, actually, this is a bit.
The ones that the ones that I do series about are ones that I can't explain. After that initial phase of research, I only do a series on one that I can't explain this. There are tens of others that I look at before I choose them that I can dismiss, because either literally someone's admitted doing it, or there's so many historical poltergeist stories about stones hitting windows. It's like, I don't know, 4 out of 10 is about stones hitting windows. I'm like, well, I mean, it's pretty easy to throw a stone at a window. I'm struggling to find. And then it will end 6 months later, some 15-year-old kid's been arrested for throwing stones around the village. I'm like, well, there we go then. So, So actually all the ones that I start with, I don't know how this is happening. And actually, with London and maybe Sunderland as well, through researching and looking into the stories, I have been able to get to a point where I'm kind of comfortable saying that they're not paranormal.
Yeah.
I can't necessarily explain everything, but I'm comfortable saying Keith Lee's the one, I suppose, that is the outlier at the moment that I don't know. And actually, the one I'm doing on Edinburgh at the moment wasn't the Wizard of the North, but there's some stuff going on in that flat that I don't know how to explain yet. And I'm not totally kind of in that I think it's paranormal. I think there's some suspicions around some people involved in the case. But I've not got there yet. And actually, I'm even beyond that, looking at the series after that already, thinking about that one. And again, I've got a story there that I can't. The stuff that was happening is, unexplainable. Multiple witnesses. It's too much for it. And even actually, some of the contemporary explanations. There's some stuff happening, and they're like, oh, well, it's built on an old mine and subsidence, and it's like, subsidence doesn't make, these things happen. That's not how it works.
That's similar to what you've said before in Italy, where the skeptical, quote-unquote, logical explanation is actually far more ridiculous than the idea that it could be paranormal.
Yeah, or they just throw it in there as an idea and without actually applying that to no, but... Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, there might be something.
I think being a desperate believer or a desperate skeptic, it's at the extreme ends of either spectrum ends up just creating something completely unbelievable.
Yeah, it does,
on both sides of the fence.
Yeah. So I do try and be as equally kind of rigorous with the skeptical, perspective, in that I can offer this as a possible skeptical explanation, but it doesn't explain how this blanket ended up on her head or something. Like,
yeah.
That was, I remember, I think I saw a UFO once. And...
Well, you did see a UFO once.
Well, I did.
Because it was unexplained. I did.
It was unidentified,
it was, yeah. And it was really odd. And to tell the story, you just think it's probably a young guy imagining something. So I was walking with Craig across the green, a patch of grass between our houses. And I literally said, I really want to see a UFO. And
you manifested it.
Really large, fast-moving, silent triangle of red went over, and then a couple of minutes later there was like 3 helicopters out, which was really odd. But I told somebody once, and they said, "Oh, you just imagined it." I was like, well, "How could I do it? Because somebody else saw it." Like,
yeah.
I had someone with me. So whilst I'm not desperate, I'm not desperate to believe that it was an alien ship flying over. I didn't know what it was. I've not seen anything like it before or since, but I wasn't the only one who saw it. So I'm open to some explanations, but not that one.
Yeah.
Because you're just so desperate to not believe it that you've come up with a stupid explanation.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's true, isn't it? It's like, no one's saying not to try and come up with a logical explanation for any of this stuff, but at least have it fit.
Yeah, do apply it to what's happened.
Don't exactly.
Don't just have a general...
Don't just say anything. Because then it's just offensive, I think, when someone does that.
I'd say it might have been a military plane. There's RAF bases quite around that. Isn't there?
There is all over the coast.
So it might have been like some sort of jet or something like that. Perfectly open to that explanation, but just not. Yeah, you imagined it.
Yeah. Oh, it's just lazy, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's really lazy. Although I've got a feeling I know the answer to this one.
Oh, go on.
But out of the cases you've covered for your podcast, but any other cases that you've done just out of personal interest, modern hauntings, anything, what would you say is the one case that you've ever looked into, studied or whatever, that's probably stayed with you the most?
Yeah, it's an interesting one actually, isn't it? Yeah, because I did find... I got really into the Sunderland one. I don't know why. There was something about it. Like, the whole thing felt really like intense and feverish. Probably a personal thing, thinking psychologically about COVID and community's response.
Putting yourself in it.
Yeah, I think that's probably the one. Like, I can't particularly associate with a 16-year-old male girl because that's not my life. But even though it was the 1840s, there was something about that one that did make it kind of land, and it really stuck with me. I found it hard to move on from, and I was really pleased to get through the research on it because it started then to kind of piece together, started to make sense. When I first read Clanny's book, it just didn't make sense. It felt like an alien world, like what they were talking about. But yeah, the more I kind of got into the story and what happened, the people and everything around it, the community, it was, really nice to be able to kind of put that one together. And so that was the one that probably did stay with me. Keithley's the one that comes back again and again because it's had probably the most publicity, and I've been asked to do talks on it and things like that. It's the one that probably has had the most community interest. But for me, Sunderland is the one that has kind of stuck with me, probably.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I didn't know the answer then because I thought you were going to say Keithley. So you surprised me. Because I thought it might have been Keithley simply because you had the vested interest in it before the podcast.
Yeah,
and then ultimately it was the foundation of your podcast.
I think maybe I've sat with Keithley for longer, though. Although it's new to people.
Yeah.
If you've listened to the podcast, even then it's only like 6 months old or something, whereas I've known about it for a long time because I've had it. So I've had that kind of time span to sit with it. I mean, it was all very exciting when I was like speaking to Gwen's, like we were WhatsApping each other, her grandkids and things like that. It was very exciting. Like, it was really, I've not had that same level of kind of investment in any other series so far.
Yeah. Just moving on ever so slightly then. So, I mean, like, we talked earlier about how, like, shows like Uncanny, certainly, has really sort of thrust paranormal storytelling into, like, mainstream almost, really. But it's kind of been out there for a while anyway on YouTube, hasn't it, with people doing paranormal investigations, going around with cameras and blah, blah, blah. What's your kind of thoughts on that? I mean, do you think that sort of ghost hunting television shows and those paranormal YouTube channels, do you feel like they kind of harm the sort of area of the field of paranormal, or do you think it sort of helps attribute to it?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because there's, like with anything, there's like good and bad, isn't there? There's obviously absolute dross out there, isn't there? If you don't have to look that hard to find it, but then there is some like really, really good stuff, as well. And it depends what you're looking for, I guess, doesn't it? If you want the shocks and the scare and that's all there for you and has been for a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah,
and it piques people's interest, doesn't it? For all the rubbish that's out there. If one person likes it and that gets them into the paranormal, like, perhaps for us it was the X-Files or that sort of thing. I don't think that's a bad thing if it fosters more people's interest in it. I don't think it's ever really gone away, has it? People have been fascinated by this. Probably Victorians probably started it. For the first people to move out from a religious.
I think it's more accessible now, isn't it? Because the thing is, like what we've talked about before, about how the paranormal has always drawn quite sort of negative attention to people. So therefore, its exposure on when we only had the option of terrestrial TV, there weren't an awful lot of TV shows dedicated specifically to the paranormal, which obviously made it kind of exciting because when one came around, you gave it your full attention. But now you only have to look at the field of paranormal podcasts even, and they're 10 a penny. There's countless YouTube channels dedicated to the paranormal, and it's everywhere now, isn't it? It's almost saturated. Really.
I think you can find your place within it, though, and I think it is possible to cut through it. Like, I found your guys' podcast when it was fairly new and really enjoyed it and thought, well, it's like sensible people talking about things that I'm interested in not a silly kind of trying to get jump scares kind of way. So I was like, well, that's great. That's what I want to listen to. And there's others like Weird in the Wade by Nat Doig. It's very historical based, although it's all based in a specific location. I really like how she does it. She's a very good historian, so there's enough in there for me again to be interested. So I think you find what you want to find. There is a lot.
It's your taste, isn't it, as well?
Yes.
So for me, I don't really get on too well with podcasts that are really heavy on sound effects and music. I prefer somebody just talking. Don't mind a bit of background, sirens or whatever.
We've got our own sound effects.
No, I don't mind a bit of it, but if there's too much, it just completely puts me off. It just doesn't work for me. Whereas some people will really enjoy that element, and that that's fine as well. So I think even though you're right, there's an awful lot out there, you still just find those ones that really work for you.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, then, so why do you think the paranormal continues to endure in the modern world despite all of the advances in science and technology? I mean, again, you've claimed you lean heavier into the side of skepticism than of believer, but we've obviously advanced a long way with science and technology to be able to account and attribute so much activity, and it could be this and it could be that. Why do you think we're still so fascinated by it?
I think it's unprovable, isn't it? And it's like a mystery at the heart of it, and life's not got a lot of mystery in it, has it really nowadays? Probably more than ever. We can explain things on such an incredible level, never before. Whereas there's still these things that happen and people give evidence for that are unexplainable by that. So I think that's the thing, isn't it? Still a bit of mystery in there that kind of sucks us in still. And also I want to believe. Just because, it's the idea of making any kind of breakthrough. Like, the exciting bit of my podcast is when I make that historical breakthrough, and that's exciting. And that would be exciting if it's disclosure days out, isn't it now? If that happens in our lifetime, that's exciting, isn't it? That's like a huge discovery, not because it's about aliens or whatever it's about, just because it's a discovery, like any kind of is exciting. So I think that's probably it, isn't it? It's still something to be discovered.
And also, despite all the technology and all of the AI, everything else, and like you said, Brett, the face of research has completely changed over relatively short space of time. But we're still human, and we probably haven't quite caught up in our psychology. So I was thinking of this when you were saying about your interest in the Sunderland case, and I was thinking about the epidemic, and you think it must have been terrifying for people who didn't really have the science there for them, and people often thought these things were like a punishment from God, or it must have been really quite terrifying. But then when you think of COVID, there were actually quite a lot of out there theories. It was to the point where some people, like, you don't even believe that this virus exists.
Oh, it's bizarre.
It's a massive thing. That's not even like a niche interest, is it? Like, it's a fully
so there was all these different opinions and feelings. There was a lot of people were anti-vax. There was some people who thought it had been the virus had been manufactured in a lab. There was all of this different stuff out there, that some of which I think, if you look at it scientifically, you can absolutely debunk. But people didn't care about that, and it was almost a faith that they had. And I think in times like a pandemic, you realise people are still just the same old human beings that they've been for many years.
True.
And I think partly that's why the paranormal's so interesting as well. I think it's that one thing that it's almost evolutionary. You kind of, there's something out there that you just don't know about.
We're just animals living in a civilized world.
Exactly. So at the start of the episode, I explained a little for the listeners what a poltergeist is, or what it's categorised as. But in your opinion, Stephen, what is a poltergeist? Do you think poltergeist activity is paranormal, psychological, or something science simply hasn't explained yet?
That's a hard question, isn't it?
It is.
I think a lot of what's reported as poltergeist is not paranormal. But then within some of the stories I've done and what I have researched, I don't think we know the answer to that question. If there is something going on that is outside of what we understand, I think it is way outside of what we understand. Like I mentioned, RSPK, all those kind of theories for it, I just don't think add up. Well, I also don't probably think it's like your dad come back to haunt you. Really, I don't think it's anything to do with someone who's passed away. Kind of. I mean, this is literally me just kind of spitballing, making this up. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, that's the question was posed to you. What you think it is,
I
then
think
that's absolutely.
If there is something happening that we don't know about, we don't know about it. Like I think it's beyond all these theories and ideas for what it could be. Yeah, I don't think any of them will be it if there is something.
Yeah. And, on the back of that question then, I suppose a follow-up question would be, do you believe that there is some form of life after death then? Do you believe that there are such things as, if we believe that poltergeist activity is related to something we're not truly able to understand right now, then what about ghosts and spirits in general?
I don't personally believe in life after death, no. But life after death suggests exactly what it is, doesn't it? Those like ghosts that are moving around with intention and with feelings and able to. I don't believe.
And
you
wonder why there aren't more, don't you? If it is a form of life after death, then technically everybody who's ever died could potentially be a ghost. You'd have it all the time.
How many billions of ghosts are there in this room right now?
Yeah.
But the only one anyone will ever have seen in Marsden is a white lady, or it's like just. So no, I don't believe in life after death in that sense. But that isn't to say that what people experience. I believe that people are telling the truth and what they experience is real. And I don't think that can always be explained as, psychological, or there might be something else. Like I said about the poltergeist one, if there is, it's something way beyond our kind of understanding of. Quantum physics is mad, isn't it?
Yeah,
Never mind the paranormal being mad. Quantum physics is mad. Yeah. Like, if I walked into that wall infinite times and one time I'd walk through it,
Yeah.
It's like, so never mind the paranormal being bad. Like, say, I love it, but
And then in a parallel universe, you didn't walk through it. And,
and how many of us are there?
Yeah.
Like, it hurts my head more than like the paranormal isn't that weird.
And you do wonder if they, like you said, if it's something, it's probably way beyond our understanding. It probably is. If there is something there, probably is something to do with quantum mechanics, I would imagine.
Quite possibly.
That's sometimes what I think. But that brings me to a question, actually. It seems to me, and even Brett, with your own experience of when you moved out of your childhood home, a lot of these things come about during traumatic experiences. Would you agree with that?
And I think that is probably, I'm on my own therapy journey myself as an individual. And I think that's like it's an important thing that people are doing it more now, but people didn't in the past.
Yes.
That wasn't kind of a thing that people did. So how you dealt with trauma, and I think I said it in the Keithley one actually, when I do a summing up in like episode 5 about what could have been causing this. Yeah. And one of the things that I kind of said could have been causing it was that, Gwen had trauma. Her dad had died when she was young, and he'd not been a very good father when he was alive. And you carry that with you, don't you? And if you don't process it in some way, who knows how it's going to manifest itself? And maybe one day she just got really pissed off and lobbed something against the wall, but no one saw her do it.
Yeah.
And then someone said, "What's just happened?" And just, "Well, I didn't do it." And then it just can something spiral that
and it's
much.
like,
but there's still that element of it being around trauma.
There is, isn't there? And to be a bit more sort of esoteric and paranormal about it, it's like, we don't know if enough trauma creates some sort of energy that then causes these weird things to happen. Still can't explain the water thing, mind you.
No,
really weird.
Yeah.
Just bad plumbing. All buildings, crap pipes.
It's the only thing I can think of. One last question for you. And I think this is going to be quite an interesting question.
Over here.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Good cop back up. But
it's the maddest interview I've ever had. Usually, you only get interviewed for a job, don't you? I've got one final question.
Yeah. I just think this is going to be quite a good question for you, because when we interviewed Liam with the lady in the bay window, I asked him a question. So what I asked was, if somebody listening believes they're experiencing paranormal activity, what would your advice be?
Just drop me an email.
And you're turning into a podcast.
Yeah, don't actually, unless you're 100 years old. I don't know. What would I do if it was happening to me? I think I'd really lean into it, though. I think I'd be a bit like, I suppose, kind of Liam has done, with the lady in the bay window. He's obviously kind of really gone into it, hasn't he? But I think if that was my house, I'd have cameras rolling 24/7, because I'd want to see it.
Which he's done. I mean,
so that's what I'd do if it was me. I'd want to capture it, because
I think Liam, when we met him, just completely down to earth dude. And for me, he seems just. I think he even said it in our episode. To be fair, he's just as confused by it all as everyone else is, and he just wants to know what the hell's going on. He's never. Despite what's going on in his house and everything, he has said that, of course, it's now made him a little bit more of a believer than he ever had been. But he still has never really sort of gone on record as such to say that his house is haunted. He just does stuff's going on in there that he can't explain. And when I think his answer to the question was to go towards it rather than go away from it. And I think that's probably the best thing to do, isn't it? Because if you can finally prove something like this, if you could finally turn around and say that, disprove, that ghosts were real or ghosts weren't real or whatever, one way you're going to make a discovery which is going to be vital and pivotal, isn't it?
There's on the City of London poltergeist, the Catholic priest who wrote about it said about if you have to deal with a poltergeist, and his advice was be nice and polite. I think, there's something about being nice, that, treating something as it's not scary and just being nice to it and see what happens, and kind of, I quite like that advice.
And I think Liam's done that really well. We went to the house and we said it was hard to feel scared in there because they've just done such a beautiful job of decorating it.
Home, isn't it?
It's
really cozy.
That's it.
Really welcoming,
lovely. They hadn't just done that thing where they put dolls everywhere and loads of old furniture and everything.
Yeah.
It looks like a home, and they've converted it and everything, and it looks beautiful. And that's it. And I think he sort of treats the whole thing with respect as well, doesn't he?
But that for me personally made it a little more weird in that there was a bit of an odd feeling upstairs, wasn't there, near the bathroom when we were sort of stood, the three of us talking there before we started recording. I just thought, I wouldn't really like to be up here on my own. There's just something a bit off about it. But again, it's just a feeling. I think when you have that feeling in somewhere that's just, really nicely decorated, really homely, it's a bit stronger than if, like you said, Brett, if there were, pot dolls lining the staircase, I'd have been creeped out by those things.
But it's almost like that's because you should be creeped out.
Designed to do that.
You're creeped out by the dolls, and that immediately creates an unsettling feeling. So it's like you're being pre-programmed, aren't you? So, Okay, well, that's been fantastic speaking to you, Stephen. Really appreciate it. It's been really, really interesting to sort of like see your perspective on the paranormal, if you will. And I would recommend anyone listening to our interview with Stephen on our podcast on our platform to go and check out Poltergeist Project. If you like your paranormal with a dash of history, then you should go check it out. Most definitely, it's fantastic. It really is. So we said at this point you're still recording on the Edinburgh Poltergeist, but you did say you had something else lined up after that. Have we got any chance of a sneak peek what that is?
It's back in Yorkshire. So that's about as much as I can probably give away, and it is that more of a haunted house, but maybe a haunted village. It all seems to be going on in this one. But it's a really big activity and loads of witnesses, which is what I'm always after.
Excellent. Well, that sounds great, especially when it's back in Yorkshire. So, fantastic. Well, you can catch your podcast on Spotify. Is it on Apple Podcasts as well?
Yeah, it's on all of them, I think. Yeah, it just kind of gets pushed around. It's hosted on Spotify and gets on YouTube and everything. So wherever you listen, you'll be able to find it.
Fantastic. And you're on Facebook?
Yes, there's a Poltergeist Project Facebook page, which is quite good, actually, isn't it? Because I talk about people, but I can put photographs and imagery and stuff on there, so it's worth checking out if you listen or not.
Oh, fantastic. So go check that out as well then. And as always, if you've enjoyed tonight's episode, you can find Beyond the Veil on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube as well. We're across the various social media platforms. Try and share our updates as often as we can, don't we? So, but you can also find us on Patreon via our social media if you're looking to help support the podcast as we're trying to sort of travel further afield. You can support us on there. It's a great way of getting some exclusive content as well, such as video versions of the podcast, which we're trying to get there. We're going to try and launch that in the next sort of few episodes, and we'll also be putting some behind the scenes looks at some bits and pieces as well. We're of course still looking out for listener stories. So if you've got any stories you'd like to share with us, you can. Although we have shared stories which are much closer to home, we're not an whole exclusive paranormal podcast. We've
not that much.
The whole's not that interesting a place, even in the field of the paranormal.
Well, it is, but just
Well. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to put down Hull, but
it's not the paranormal capital, is it?
No, it's not much of a paranormal hub. So you're right. But of course, if you've got a story that you'd like to share with us, something that's happened to you, and you can't explain it, somewhere you'd like to share, you can send it to us. You can either direct message us on our social media or just drop us an email at btvpodcaststories@gmail.com. And of course, you can send those anonymously if you'd prefer, you'd prefer not to be named, etc. And I think that's where we'll leave it there. So thank you very much, Stephen, again.
It's
been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thanks very much.
And just as Stephen has shown, sometimes the most unsettling stories are the ones told by ordinary people. And as for the paranormal itself, perhaps the reason these stories endure is because deep down many of us feel there may be something more waiting beyond the edges of our understanding, something glimpsed only briefly in the dark corners of old houses, in whispered stories passed between generations, in moments that logic struggles to explain. And maybe that's why we continue searching, because every now and then someone experiences something that leaves behind a lingering question. What if it was all real? And how will we ever know unless it happens to you? Until next time, keep questioning, and remember, the stories which refuse to stay buried are often the ones which wait beyond the veil.